A single ribbon of rusted track split the endless prairie like a scar healed wrong, and the train that hissed to a halt on it looked as though it had grown tired sometime after the Civil War and never found the gumption to finish dying. Lorelei. Gable pressed a trembling palm to the cracked glass of the passenger car window, half expecting the pane to crumble beneath her touch the way everything else in her life seemed to lately. Wind lashed through a ragged seam in the frame, teasing loose strands of her hair across her eyes and knotting them around lashes wet with equal parts grit and tears. She breathed in, tasted coal smoke and dust, and told herself, not for the first time since dawn, that breathing, at least, was something no one had managed to take from her yet. The conductor barked, "Epitaph Crossing." Last call, with the weariness of a man who'd made the same announcement to the same handful of half-dead souls for 20 years straight. The name hit Lorelei's chest like the butt of a rifle, Epitaph, as if fate enjoyed its jokes engraved. In stone, passengers shifted, boots thudding on warped pine planks, but no one spared the young woman in the torn calico dress more than a fleeting glance. The garment once lilac, now road grime gray-gaped at one shoulder where stitches had ripped in a struggle she still felt in every bruise. Her corset strings dangled, snapped like promises. One stocking was gone altogether, left behind in the mud miles east with pieces of her pride. She gathered what dignity remained, clutched the shabby satchel that held the entirety of her worldly possessions, a wilted packet of letters, 3 coins, one comb missing half its teeth, and rose on unsteady legs. Every motion burned her ribs from the conductor's rough shove when she'd tried to refuse the ticket bought for her. Her wrist, where the scar of an older rope still itched when the wind changed. Her heart, where memories lodged like shrapnel, too near an artery to remove. The car's door screeched open. Heat blew in, smelling of creosote and wild sage, and with it came the sprawling quiet of a town forgotten by schedules, by fortune, maybe even by God. Lorelei stepped down, shoes hitting dirt so fine it puffed around her ankles like smoke. The platform consisted of a single splintered bench and an upright telegraph pole whose wires sagged away into the horizon. Beyond that, 24 buildings hunched together as though embarrassed to be seen. A leaning livery, a general store with its windows boarded since winter, a saloon advertising stale beer and chipped paint, and at the far western edge, a church. Steeple pointing a broken finger at heaven. No one waited. Steam hissed, metal groaned. The train clanked, shuddered, and began to creep forward. Panic fluttered in Lorelei's throat. What if this was a mistake? But momentum was relentless. The iron beast gathered speed, carrying away the only proof she'd ever been anywhere else. She watched until the last car vanished into shimmering distance, a serpent swallowed by its own mirage. Epitaph Crossing exhaled long and low. Wind rattled a shutter somewhere, the only reply. Lorelei drew her ragged shawl tighter even though the afternoon sun pressed hot on her skin. She scanned the street, 2 ranch hands loading oats beside the mercantile, an ancient mutt snoring under a porch, a hunched clerk sweeping dust out of his doorway without enthusiasm. Every face she met slid away quickly, as if poverty or shame were contagious diseases best avoided. A horse stamped behind her, and the sound jolted through her marrow. Lorelei pivoted too fast, tripping on her skirt's frayed hem, bracing for the coarse laughter of the men who'd torn it. Instead, she found a single rider watching her with unreadable eyes the color of November rainfall gray, but alive with currents beneath the surface. He sat a rangy roan gelding with the easy patience of someone so familiar with the animal that the line between man and mount blurred around the edges. A broad-brimmed hat shaded his expression. The rest of him dust-brown duster, black shirt, trousers tucked into scuffed boots, looked as ordinary as any cattleman on the Santa Fe Trail. Ordinary, except for the hush that fell across the station the moment he drew rein, as though the prairie itself paused to listen to his silence. He dismounted without hurry, boots hitting earth in a soft thud. For a breath they studied one another, Lorelei trying not to flinch, the rancher measuring something she couldn't name. Then his gaze dipped to the rip in her dress, lingered on the angry bruise darkening her collarbone, and a muscle in his jaw ticked once. He tugged free the saddle blanket slung behind his cantle. A worn square of Navajo weave sun, faded to umber and ochre, and held it out. "Ma'am," he said, voice pitched low enough that the word felt private despite the open air. "Might do better. With this around your shoulders than with dust and sun on bare skin." Lorelei stared. Kindness undemanding, uncomplicated kindness felt foreign, as a language she'd forgotten. She didn't move, the rancher's brow creased, not with impatience, but something quieter, perhaps recognition of fragility. He stepped closer and draped the blanket lightly around her, like placing a quilt over someone half asleep. His fingers brushed the inside of her elbow, steady, warm, and gone before she could recoil. "That color suits you," he murmured. Then tipped his hat and turned toward the freight wagon parked near the depot, as though wrapping strangers in blankets were routine chores between loading crates and counting fence posts. She found her voice, raspy as gravel. "Why?" He paused mid-stride. "Son's merciless," he answered without facing her. "No call letting it be cruel when it don't have to." "I meant," she swallowed, "you don't even know my name." He adjusted a leather strap on a barrel, stamped Kendrick Ranch and said, "Figure a person doesn't have to earn decency." After a beat he added, "But I'm Silas Dunn, if that eases things." Silas Dunn. The name rippled through the bystanders' hushed murmurs, quick looks. Lorelei tucked the blanket tighter. Silas reclaimed his reins, but made no move to mount. "Stage road's 6 miles east," he said. "Used to run regular till the ford washed out. If you're holding a ticket for anywhere else, you'll wait 2 weeks for track repair." She shook her head. I don't have anywhere else." The admission tasted like defeat. Silas studied her satchel, the way her fingers strangled the handle. "Hunger'll find you before 2 weeks does." Heat surged up Lorelei's bruised throat. Humiliation, anger, memory, a litany of hungers already found her, none merciful. "I'll manage." Silas nodded as if the conversation were concluded, then walked to the wagon, hauled himself to the seat, and set reins across his knees. For an instant, Lorelei's relief that he wasn't pressing further warred with raw panic that she'd watched the only gentle soul for 100 miles disappear down the road, leaving her exposed. "Town's boarding house burned last March," he noted without looking at her. "But Mrs. Frey at the church keeps a cot in the vestry for travelers. She feed you soup and scripture in equal measure." Lorelei forced a brittle smile. "Thank you." Silas clicked his tongue and the roan started forward. 2 clopping strides and Lorelei felt emptiness yawning like a canyon. She had not asked for rescue, yet some stubborn spark recognized that a blanket was more than wool. It was the first mercy she'd known since the day her parents' debts sold her future. She caught breath, stepped off the platform into choking dust, and called, "Silas?" He eased the horse around. "I owe you." He considered this. "Owes? A hard currency. Suppose you pay it forward when someone else's turn comes." Her eyes stung. She nodded. He dipped his hat again, but before he could turn the wagon, hoofbeats thundered on the main street, 3 riders barreling from the east, coats flapping like vultures' wings. Lorelei stiffened, the blanket slipped. Silas's posture changed so subtly she might have missed it. Spine straighter, reins gathered like thread drawn taut. The lead rider, a scar-jawed man with a revolver hanging low, hauled his horse to a spray of gravel. "Halt." He scanned the platform and spat. "Station master said a girl in torn lilac got off the train. You seen her?" Lorelei's pulse crashed like storm water against canyon walls. Instinct screamed run, but her knees locked. Silas swung down, placing his body, a single breadth of worn canvas and lean muscle, between her and the newcomers. "Reckon plenty of passengers wear lilac," Silas said, voice calm as a millpond. Mighty poor description if a bounty means to be collected. The scarred man narrowed his eyes. Ain't no bounty, she's property. Property, the word cracked inside Lorelei, unleashing a rush of chained nights and bruised dawns. Silas's shoulders tightened. Strange, he drawled, how property carries its own heartbeat. The rider's companions laughed, though not with mirth. One flicked open a folding knife. We'll check behind you, cowboy. Move. Silas didn't. Dust gusted, swirling around his boots, around the roan stamping behind the wagon, around Lorelei, who clutched the blanket like armor. The scarred man's hand drifted to his holster. Won't ask again. Lorelei's world tunneled. Wind roaring in her ears, sun glaring off pistol steel, the certainty of pain returning. All sound seemed far away except Silas's next words, spoken over his shoulder so low only she could hear them. Trust me to stand. He turned back to the riders, voice carrying now. You got a bill of sale, friend. Some lawful document says that woman belongs to you? The rider growled. Got a rope says we take what's ours. Silas shifted the duster aside with one fingertip, revealing the butt of a Colt Peacemaker resting easy against his thigh. The motion was unhurried, a man adjusting for heat, but Lorelei saw tension ripple through the horses. They felt what humans sometimes missed. Problem is, Silas continued, rope don't outrank Colt in any court I know. A standoff stretched, brittle as ice over spring water. Voices from distant porches hushed. Even the mud under the mercantile lifted its head. The knife man dismounted, boots crunching gravel. 3 of us, 1 of you. Silas's gaze flicked briefly to Lorelei, then returned to the intruders. Count again. Confusion rippled over the men's faces. Then Lorelei realized she counted, and she was 2. She swallowed, squared shoulders beneath blanket wool older than her grandmother, and stared back at weapon steel knife. Man's grin showed broken teeth. Girl's got fire. Shame will snuff it. He lunged. Silas stepped into the charge. In one motion, he caught the attacker's wrist, twisted, and slammed him against the wagon wheel. Knife clattered. Scarjaw yanked his revolver, but before the barrel cleared leather, Silas's free hand was on his Colt. Time contracted. Thunder, smoke, a scream from a horse. Scarjaw's pistol flew. His fingers splayed, blood beading across knuckles where Silas's bullet had shaved flesh. Third rider, a younger man, went white, fumbling reins. I didn't sign on for gunplay, then ride, Silas said. The youth wheeled his mount and bolted. Knife man groaned, pinned beneath Silas's knee. Scarjaw clutched his hand, shock eclipsing rage. Silas holstered, exhaled, and turned to Lorelei. You hurt? She shook her head, words trapped by adrenaline. Scarjaw found his voice, raw and shaking. You don't know who you're meddling with. That girl's owed to the Southern Crown Company. They're foreman'll come with 10 men. Silas considered him, eyes flinty. Then he'd best bring 11. He hauled the knife man upright, relieved him of the folded blade, and shoved both assailants toward the end of the platform. Tie your friend a tourniquet before he bleeds. Shame all over my town. Then ride west until you forget the taste of epitaph dust. They staggered off, cursing, trailing bravado like smoke from a wet fire. Silas watched until they mounted and disappeared into the shimmering distance. Lorelei realized she'd been holding her breath. She let it out in a shudder that threatened to crumple her knees. Silas turned, catching the wobble, and steadied her elbow. Storm's not blown through yet, he warned softly. Men like that fetch bigger storms. Lorelei found her voice, hoarse but steady enough. If I stay, I bring trouble on you. Trouble rides the range whether we invite it. What matters is who opens the gate. He gestured toward the wagon. Come, you'll sit up front where the breeze is kinder. Church is 2 streets north. Lorelei hesitated, then climbed onto the bench. The blanket slipped again. She drew it close. Silas chirped, and the roan moved. They rolled past shuttered facades, townsfolk peeking around doorframes, curiosity budding where apathy had bloomed. Lorelei felt their stares like weight, but also like witness, proof she wasn't invisible anymore. She caught Silas studying her peripheral wise, as though tallying hurts the eye couldn't see. For the first time since the train whistle at dawn, she thought maybe the future didn't belong solely to men with ropes and company foremen with contracts signed in whiskey and greed. Maybe the future could be something she shaped with her own scarred hands. A bell tolled once, slow and solemn. The church rose ahead, white paint peeling but door wide open. Silas pulled the team to a stop. Mrs. Frey, a matronly woman with iron gray curls and a flour-smudged apron, hurried down the steps. Her eyes widened at the state of Lorelei's dress, her bruises, the dried blood at her temple. Without a word, she wrapped an arm around the younger woman and guided her inside. Lorelei glanced back at Silas. He was already lifting a crate from the wagon bed supplies for the ranch. No doubt, but paused when he felt her gaze. Their eyes locked across 30 feet and 3 worlds, and something unspoken passed between them. Acknowledgement, gratitude, promise. He tipped his hat. She offered the smallest nod her battered dignity could manage. Inside the church, lamplight flickered over wooden pews and a quilt-strewn cot near the pot-bellied stove. Mrs. Frey pressed a mug of chamomile into Lorelei's, hands infussed with feudal kindness at the rip in her dress. Lorelei sank onto the cot, the blanket Silas had given her pooled in her lap, its earthy scent grounding her in the here and now. She sipped the tea. Her hands still shook out the window. She saw Silas climb back to the wagon seat and turn the team toward the distant hills. Dusk gathered behind him, painting the sky in bruised violets. She wondered if he rode alone here always, or if ghosts of choices he never spoke kept him company. Mrs. Frey knelt, smoothing the blanket. "Child, whoever left you in that shape deserves a reckoning, but you're safe for tonight. Reverend's away visiting kin, so it's just us hens. Tomorrow we'll see about mending that dress proper." Safe. The word was a lullaby and a warning. She had believed herself safe before a broker's carriage carried her from her parents' porch, before a plantation foreman measured her height like livestock, before a saloon back room where contracts were rewritten in sweat and silence. Safety was a horizon retreating each time she thought she'd reached it. But as the blanket's weave warmed against her palms, Lorelei dared to hope this safety might endure long enough to let her build something stronger than fear. The church fell into quiet, kettle whistle fading, floorboards cooling, Mrs. Frey's humming drifting down hallways. Outside, desert night deepened, and with it Lorelei's eyelids grew heavy. Yet just before sleep claimed her, hoofbeats echoed faintly. In the distance, many, not few, carrying laughter laced with malice. Her eyes snapped open. She gripped the blanket, heart hammering. Under the window, the street lay empty, but dust rose farther down the road, a cloud marching toward town. Company men. The returning riders Silas warned of. Her breath quickened. She swung her feet to the floor, meaning to wake Mrs. Frey, but paused. Silas, did he know? If trouble came tonight, would he face it alone on a ranch lit only by moonlight? Resolve set like mortar in her spine. She stood, rewrapped the blanket as a shawl, and slipped out the side door into velvet night. Moonlight silvered the dusty track east, and there in the distance torch flicker bobbed like will-o'-wisps riders indeed, 6 or 7, their direction unmistakable. Lorelei's fear coiled, ready to strangle courage, but a memory of Silas's quiet certainty, the feel of his hand steady on her elbow, shored her resolve. She ducked back inside, found a lantern and a tin of matches, then scribbled a note for Mrs. Frey. "Gone to warn Mr. Dunn, will return." She didn't add soon, because soon was a luxury. Outside again, She lifted her skirt to run, blanket flapping behind like a banner. The town blurred past, the mercantile, the telegraph pole humming ghost messages from coasts she might never see, the silent station where daylight had abandoned her. She ran until lungs burned, till stitches ripped anew, till the prairie opened. Wide and empty dot behind her, hooves thundered closer. Ahead, moonlight glinted off a sliver of tin roof Silas's ranch house, its chimney exhaling a solitary thread of smoke. She pushed harder, every bruise screaming, but before she could reach the corral fence, she heard riders angle off the main road toward the house. Toward Silas, Lorelei stumbled to a stop, chest on fire. She looked at the blanket in her hands, at the lantern's trembling glow, then at the Colt hanging on a peg by the porch, visible because the cabin door stood ajar. Silas's silhouette appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. He saw the riders. He saw her. Their eyes met across 20 yards of silvered grass, and the silent question passed like lightning. Was she prey bringing predators? Or was she the signal of a brewing battle neither could face alone? Behind Silas, inside the cabin, a small lamp illuminated the corner, revealing crates of ammunition stacked beside a battered strongbox stamped Kendrick Ranch Ledgers, the company's ledgers. Proof of debts stolen from homesteaders, maybe from Silas himself. Proof men might kill to keep buried. A shout cracked the night scar jaw, voice raw with promised vengeance. The riders spread, cutting off escape. Silas reached for his Colt, but froze when Scar Jaw hauled a bound figure from one saddle, Mrs. Frey. Gagged and wide-eyed, her apron stained with dust, Lorelei's blood iced. They'd taken the church first, and she had led them straight to Silas. The rancher stepped forward, hands lifting in parley, but the intruders fanned out, rifles leveled. Torchlight painted everything in nightmare hues. Lorelei tightened fingers on the lantern handle. She could flee into the darkness, leave these people to their fates, survive another day. Or she could step into the line of fire to repay the debt. A saddle blanket had written on her heart. Choice hammered like thunder. She inhaled, tasting prairie and kerosene and fear. Then she stepped onto the porch beside Silas, lifted the lantern high so every gunman saw her face, saw the torn dress, the bruise, the eyes that no longer begged but blazed. Scar Jaw's grin slit moonlight. There she is. Told you the rancher'd pick up strays. Hand her over, Dunn, and we'll let the old hen go. Silas's reply was a whisper only Lorelei heard. Whatever happens, keep your eyes on the horizon. She didn't understand until she saw far beyond the riders, a low red glow blooming like dawn where no sun should rise. Fire. The Kendrick Ranch storehouses, perhaps torched by allies Silas never mentioned, or by fate tipping scales. Scarjaw followed her gaze, curses tearing loose. In the instant his eyes left them, Silas moved, Lorelei moved. Flame met gun metal. Night exploded. The first shot hadn't even faded when. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Listlessly collapse, but the pain held thin, stubborn, and surprisingly unbroken, just like Lorelei herself. For a long heartbeat, she stared at her own reflection. Wind-tangled auburn hair, a face smudged with cinders, eyes that looked older than her 22 years. The torn evening gown she wore, once ivory silk, now streaked brown with soot, fluttered in the hot gust that leaked through a crack in the sash. Somewhere behind her, the train's boiler released a final petulant hiss, as if to remind everyone. Aboard that it had gone as far as it cared to. The conductor shuffled down the aisle, announcing in a voice too cheerful for dawn, "Last stop Crossrock Depot. No further service west of the Divide till next spring. All remaining passengers disembark. All remaining." As though they were freight excess cargo that had to be shaken loose before the locomotive limped back east, Lorelei pressed 2 fingers to the bruised welt under her left eye and drew a steadying breath that tasted of coal dust. Asterisk, get off the train. Asterisk, she ordered herself. Asterisk, find your feet. Then figure out what in heaven's name comes next. Asterisk, she stood, knees trembling, and reached for the valise she had fled with, nothing inside but a mirror compact, a letter of credit she could know, Longarine, and a locket that didn't belong to her. The moment she lifted the case, its lock snapped. An avalanche of shattered glassware, her step, mother's perfumed lotions, spilled onto the floorboards. A sweet cloying scent billowed up, masking the coal smoke. Someone farther up the carriage laughed, a brittle sound, but Lorelei ignored it. She gathered what she could, crammed the shards back inside, and closed the ruined valise as best she could. Outside, dawn spread across the prairie in bruised bands of violet and rose. Crossrock Station was nothing more than a long, low platform, nailed together from unpainted boards and a single shack with a telegraph key, a bench, and a pot-bellied stove so battered it seemed to exist mostly out of habit. The town proper, if such a word could be applied, huddled a quarter-mile farther on. 6 clapboard buildings, a livery, a feed store, a mercantile, and a church steeple that leaned westward like a tired pilgrim. Lorelei stepped onto the platform and immediately felt eyes on her railroad men. 2 drovers waiting on feed deliveries. A hand listlessly collapse, but the pain held thin, stubborn, and surprisingly unbroken, just like Lorelei herself. For a long heartbeat, she stared at her own reflection. Wind-tangled auburn hair, a face smudged with cinders, eyes that looked older than her 22 years. The torn evening gown she wore, once ivory silk, now streaked brown with soot, fluttered in the hot gust that leaked through a crack in the sash. Somewhere behind her, the train's boiler released a final petulant hiss, as if to remind everyone aboard that it had gone as far as it cared to. The conductor shuffled down the aisle, announcing in a voice too cheerful for dawn, "Last stop, Crossrock Depot. No further service west of the Divide till next spring. All remaining passengers disembark. All remaining." As though they were freight excess cargo that had to be shaken loose before the locomotive limped back east, Lorelei pressed 2 fingers to the bruised welt under her left eye and drew a steadying breath that tasted of coal dust. Asterisk, get off the train. Asterisk, she ordered herself. Asterisk, find your feet. Then figure out what in heaven's name comes next. Asterisk, she stood, knees trembling, and reached for the valise she had fled with, nothing inside but a mirror compact, a letter of credit she could know, Longarine, and a locket that didn't belong to her. The moment she lifted the case, its lock snapped. An avalanche of shattered glassware, her step, mother's perfumed lotions, spilled onto the floorboards. A sweet cloying scent billowed up, masking the coal smoke. Someone farther up the carriage laughed, a brittle sound, but Lorelei ignored it. She gathered what she could, crammed the shards back inside, and closed the ruined valise as best she could. Outside, dawn spread across the prairie in bruised bands of violet and rose. Crossrock Station was nothing more than a long, low platform, nailed together from unpainted boards and a single shack with a telegraph key, a bench, and a pot-bellied stove so battered it seemed to exist mostly out of habit. The town proper, if such a word could be applied, huddled a quarter-mile farther on. 6 clapboard buildings, a livery, a feed store, a mercantile, and a church steeple that leaned westward like a tired pilgrim. Lorelei stepped onto the platform and immediately felt eyes on her railroad men. 2 drovers waiting on feed deliveries, a handful of ranch hands bound for distant spreads. Their gazes scraped across her torn silk like sandpaper. Weighing the worth of whatever trouble had hauled her this far, she lifted her chin. "If you cannot be safe, be unafraid," she heard her late father whisper, Julian Gable, gentleman antiquarian, a man who had crossed deserts with less than what she carried now. But her heartbeat betrayed her, skittering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Miss?" The conductor, Mr. Dunleavy, removed his cap and cleared his throat. "We've offloaded your trunk." He gestured to a solitary steamer chest set awkwardly near the freight crane. Its monogram, LEG, was half obscured by soot. Beside it lay a canvas-wrapped parcel addressed to Jeremiah Strickland, Esquire, Crossrook, Territory of Wyoming. Her breath seized. Jeremiah. The name was an iron hook in her chest. She had counted on the man's predictable cruelty, on him staying in Boston to salvage his reputation after she ran. Yet here his parcel sat, proof he had, at the very least, reached out this far. "Thank you," she murmured, voice hoarse. Dunleavy hesitated. "You got folk meeting you, miss?" "Another train don't run till spring. Road agent talk says trails west are washed out. If you've a telegram to send, Martin in the shack, I'll manage." She pressed coin into his palm, more than the baggage fee. The conductor's eyes softened. He tipped his cap and moved on, too kind to ask the questions that buzzed behind his eyes. Lorelei looked around. No coaches waited, no friendly faces. Only the vast, indifferent prairie and a wind that promised snow by nightfall. Farther down the platform, a man unloaded tack from a weather-scarred buckboard square, shouldered, slate-eyed, as unhurried as a mountain. He secured each bundle with precise knots, checked the sorrel team's harness, and only then seemed to notice her. Their gazes touched, just an instant, nothing more. But time stretched thin along the stair. In his gray eyes she saw neither curiosity nor contempt, only an assessing calm, as though he were puzzling the weight of a distant thunderhead, deciding whether it would bring rain or ruin. He looked away first and hoisted a coil of hemp into the wagon bed. Fine, she thought. Let him look. Let them all look. She squared her shoulders and strode toward the telegraph shack, only to be intercepted by the station master, a stooped man whose badge read Marncum. "Beggin' your pardon, miss," Farncum said, wringing his cap. "But the office received a wire for you just yesterday. Came collect from Abilene. Hold for El Gable." He handed her a folded sheet. "I was fixing to leave it with the sheriff, seeing as no one disembarks here most weeks." His eyes slid over her torn silk and the bruise. "Fortunate timing, I suppose." Lorelei accepted the telegram with numb fingers, broke the seal, and read. "Stop running. Debts find their due. See you soon. J.S." She swallowed against a surge of bile. Jeremiah had beaten her to Abilene at least 2 states ago. How many rails had he greased to track her? How many telegraphers bought? The distance between her and danger had never felt narrower. "Thank you," she managed again, across the platform. The slate-eyed rancher climbed into his buckboard. He guided the team in a lazy circle, then halted beside her steamer trunk. She watched, puzzled, as he dismounted, lifted the chest, effortless despite its weight, and slid it into his wagon. Lorelei's shock snapped her paralysis. "Excuse me, that trunk is mine." The rancher brushed dust from his gloves. "Reckon so." His voice was low, even wrapped in dusk quiet patience. "But you'll be needing a ride same as it." He inclined his head toward the horizon where clouds bruised the sky. "Storm by noon. Next nearest settlement's 40 miles through open range. You got a place closer?" Lorelei opened her mouth, found no answer. She stared at the clouds, saw them now as he did, ragged veils driven by a merciless wind. "Thought not." He lifted the canvas parcel addressed to Jeremiah and examined the label. "Strickland any kin?" "Not exactly." She hugged her ruined valise. Enemy sounded melodramatic. Fiance tasted like bile. "Well, whoever he is, he ain't." "Here." The rancher loaded the parcel too, rope lashed both pieces, then offered his hand. "Callum Holt," he said. "Most folks round here just say Cal." Lorelei studied the hand, weather, cracked knuckles, a faint crescent scar at the base of the thumb. It was not the hand of a gambler or a gunman or a railroad dandy, it was a builder's hand. She placed her own trembling fingers in it. "Lorelei Gable," she whispered. Cal's grip was firm, steadying. He helped her onto the wagon seat. Then Lorelei descended carefully, blanket around her shoulders. Creek water mirrored the sky, bruised and restless. She knelt, cupped a palmful, and drank. Cold stabbed teeth, but she drank again, greedy. Cal watered the sorrels, checked hooves, adjusted a loose hain strap. Lorelei watched his hands, competent, gentle. "You said you'd drift," she ventured. He shrugged. "Cattle buyers, trail inspections, sometimes mediation between spreads. Territory courts 3 counties east folks hire me to settle disagreements. Before lawyers get rich. You're a what rancher, arbiter?" Cal chuckled, a low rumble like distant thunder. "Never heard it put so fine. I keep things mended. Fences, relationships, occasionally bones." He pointed at the scar on his thumb. "Happened during a fistfight over water rights. Man swung a branding iron," he winked. "We settled amicably after." Lorelei laughed a sound she hadn't made in weeks. It startled her as much as it seemed to startle him. Clouds closed ranks overhead. Cal lifted his face to the wind. "Storm's quickening. Best push hard if we want roof overhead before dark." He helped her aboard, but before climbing up he reached beneath the bench and withdrew a worn Colt nestled in a pommel holster. He handed it, but first. "I don't," she recoiled. "It's loaded proper." He tapped the empty hammer slot. "1. Chamber down so it won't fire if she bumps. Keep it for the notion of confidence, if not the use." Lorelei accepted the revolver with shaking fingers. The walnut grip was warm, as though it had waited for her. They drove up from the creek, wheels cutting ruts in damp sand. The prairie stretched wide, but Lorelei felt the horizon tilting, closing in. Every gust of wind became hoofbeats. Every shadow pursuit. "Tell me about your sister," she said, desperate for distraction. Cal obliged, painting a portrait of Marion Holt, scholar of native grasses, raiser of a mischievous 8-year-old named Eli, keeper of Solace Creek's books. His voice warmed, vowels softening, consonants smoothing around her name. Lorelei listened, lulled by the cadence, until a shot cracked open the afternoon. The sorrel skittered sideways. Cal cursed, hauled on the reins. A second shot whined past the wagon and kicked dust from the road ahead. "Down!" Cal leaned across. Lorelei, shoving her to the footwell as splinters burst from the wagon's high seatback. She clutched the Colt, heart slamming. Cal flicked the reins hard. The team lurched into a gallop, wagon rocking viciously. Another shot barked, closer. Lorelei risked a glance over her shoulder. Riders 3 pounded up the slope behind them. Black dusters flapped. Scarves masked. Faces. The center rider brandished a rifle across the saddle horn. Cal whipped the team. "Hang on!" he shouted against the wind. The road funneled into a narrow cut between sandstone bluffs, a wind-carved defile barely wider than the wagon. Lorelei braced herself. The sorrels plunged into the cut, sandstone walls blurred. Powdered grit stung her eyes. Hooves hammered rock behind them, closer. The rifle cracked again. A shard of wagon plank jumped near Lorelei's boots. Cal snapped the reins through, his weight to the inside as the wagon careened around a blind corner. They burst from the defile onto open highland only to confront a dry wash, its bank steep, 15 feet deep. "No room to turn," Cal muttered. Lorelei followed his gaze to a rickety trestle spanning the wash, a footbridge, narrow, its planks missing teeth. "If we slow, they'll overtake," Cal assessed. "If we stop, behind them," the rifle cracked again. Lorelei's pulse hammered her temples. "Your horses, they can't take the bridge at a gallop." "Maybe they can," Cal said. "Maybe they can't. Question is, do we hazard the jump flinch-eyed, or do we drive straight and pray the boards hold?" Fear blistered her throat, but within it a new spark flared, anger. At Jeremiah, at fate, at her own helplessness. She shifted, lifted the Colt, sighted on the rifleman's shadow flickering between dust swirls, squeezed the trigger. The shot roared, tore the breath from her lungs. She missed, but the bullet struck the sandstone wall beside the rider. Rock fountained. The rifleman flinched, his horse shied. The pursuit stuttered. Cal's eyes widened, equal parts respect and surprise. Steady, next one aim lower. Lorelei swallowed, cocked the hammer again. The bridge loomed. Cal bellowed, "Hiya!" The sorrels surged. Wheels hit the first plank with a nerve-sawing crack. Board after board rattled under the iron-clad rims. Lorelei fired again. This time the lead rider's Stetson spun away. He ducked, lost control. His mount veered, crashed into the second rider. Behind them, the trestle groaned a sickening, timber-rending wail. Cal whipped the horses across. The last span just as the central support gave. The bridge folded, collapsed in a cloud of dust and splinters. Two of the pursuers reined up hard, horses screaming inches from the chasm. The third's mount skidded too late. Rider and beast pitched into the void, vanishing with a hollow, bone-shaking thud. Lorelei stared, gun dangling from limp fingers. The wind carried distant curses, the surviving riders forcing their horses along the wash's edge. Seeking another crossing, Cal aimed the wagon toward a cluster of pinyon pines and finally reined in. They sat panting, horses lathered, wagon shuddering. "First thing," Cal said after a moment, voice hoarse, "I commend your marksmanship." "Second thing," he turned, meeting her stunned gaze. "You all right?" She tried to answer, found her throat locked. Tears burned, anger and relief commingled. She nodded once. Cal reached over, gently pried the revolver from her grip, and set it on the seat. "Those riders, any look familiar?" "Scarves," she rasped. "Couldn't see faces. But the rifles?" "Eastern make, city types," Cal exhaled. "Miss Gable, I believe your troubles found you already." She shivered despite the blanket. "I thought maybe days. Telegraphs travel faster than trains." He scanned the horizon. "We'll cut southwest. Dry Mesa route. They won't expect that. Adds hours, but gives us cover and a chance to shake them." Lorelei wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I've brought danger to you." Cal's expression softened. "Danger finds us all sooner or later. Point is whether we stand together or apart." He unwrapped the canvassed parcel in the wagon bed, Jeremir's shipment. Inside lay something heavy wrapped in velvet. Cal drew back the cloth. A shotgun, hammerless, Damascus twisted barrels, exquisite engraving. A matching pair of silver-mounted dueling pistols nestled beside it. Cal whistled low. "Fine guns. Worth a fortune." Lorelei stared, horrified. He's sending weapons. Why? But she knew why. Jeremir Strickland considered duels an art form, and sending such a set ahead to the frontier was declaration of intent. He meant to finish matters personally. Cal wrapped the weapons again, stowed them deeper under tack. "We'll keep these from falling into wrong hands." The sky bruised darker. Snowflakes wandered, the wind-white moths seeking flame. Cal clicked the team onward. They reached Dry Mesa. By sundown, wind gouged, pine fringed, crowned by a derelict line shack once used by telegraph crews. Cal pulled into the lee of a rock face, unhitched horses, and built a small fire shielded by scrap tin. Lorelei helped, fingers numb. "Won't light the mesa up like beacon," Cal assured. "But heat'll keep frostbite off toes." They shared jerky. Dried apples, coffee brewed in a battered tin percolator. The first sip seared Lorelei's tongue. She welcomed the pain. "You shoot before?" Cal asked quietly. She stared into the flames. "Father taught me rifles marksmanship contests on our estate lawn," he said, knowing how prevented fear of how. She managed a brittle laugh. "But a lawn's not a canyon." Cal poked the fire. "You held steady. Courage ain't lack of fear, it's doing what needs doing despite it." She met his gaze, saw honesty there, unvarnished. Snow thickened. They wrapped in the saddle blanket, shoulders brushing. Cal kept watch, Winchester across his knees. Lorelei's eyes drifted to the canvassed parcel, Jaramir's weapons, glinting dully in firelight. She swallowed. "I have to tell you the truth." So she did, voice low, halting. Engagement to Jaramir forged by her stepmother's gambling debt. Jaramir's cruelty revealed too late, her flight west. The locket she carried proof he'd murdered a debtor's wife and framed another. "Man!" She spoke until the words ran dry and the wind swallowed the confession. Cal listened without interrupting. When she finished, shame burned her cheeks brighter than the fire. He took a slow breath. That locket evidence strong enough to ruin him. More. She touched the chain at her throat. Inside, a microphotograph of him dragging the body, taken by a Pinkerton hired to follow the victim's husband. The Pinkerton was killed 10 days later. My stepmother bought the locket. Cheap, not knowing what she held. Jaramir found out. He means to recover it and silence any witness. Her voice cracked. Cal's jaw tightened. Then we'll see it delivered to right hands in Cheyenne or Denver. Territory courts hungry for justice lately. He turned, placed a hand over hers. You'll see that done. And you'll live to see Yair Strickland stand trial. On that, I stake Solace Creek's brand. Snow hissed against the fire. Lorelei felt heat rise behind her eyes, an ache like thaw after long frost. She pressed her free hand to her mouth, stifling a sob, and nodded. Wind keened through pines, carrying distant thunder. No, not thunder. A distant report? Rifle? Cal stiffened, eyes narrowing. Another shot followed, fainter. He extinguished the fire with a sweep of sand. They found us, Lorelei whispered. Cal rose, scanning the dark. Or someone else entirely. An eerie orange glow bloomed on the far side of the mesa. Flames rising fast. Cal cursed softly. That direction, Solace. Creek Line cabin. Marion and Eli sometimes ride up for cedar kindling. Lorelei's blood iced. You think, if Strickland's men split up, one group might circle to the ranch. If Marion's there, he didn't finish. He grabbed saddlebags, shoved the dueling pistols inside, slung the shotgun, then hitched the sorrels. Lorelei climbed aboard without being asked, Colt tight in her fist. They drove into the snow-thick dark, toward the flicker of distant flames. The wind howled around them, an unholy choir, and Lorelei realized the prairie did not care one whit for their small drama. Survival would be carved by their own hands and hardened hearts. Hours later, flames silhouetted Solace Creek's welcome arch. But the welcome had been twisted. Lanterns smashed, gate torn from hinges, footprints trampled into mud. The main house two-story timber stood dark save for dull red embers licking the porch roof. Cal hauled the wagon broadside. Leapt down. Marion, Eli. His voice cracked the night. No answer but the hiss of snow melting on charred wood. Lorelei followed. Cloak flaring, smoke stung her eyes. Inside, overturned chairs littered the parlor. Glass crunched underfoot. A teacup lay shattered near the stairs, porcelain shards glossy in ember light. Cal knelt beside a small, wool-knit cap half buried in soot. He lifted it, ash trickling off the blackened yarn fox ears. Lorelei's heart sank. Eli adored that cap. Cal's shoulders trembled once, then stilled iron fists around grief. He rose, jaw set. They took them. Lorelei swallowed bile. Alive? Alive, he said, though certainty wavered. Horse prints pooled in the mud fresh, leading southwest. Into the river breaks. Cal scanned shelves, rifles gone, ammunition scattered. Whoever struck it armed themselves well. He exhaled, turned to Lorelei. This was never about my kin. It was always about you. They'll bargain Marion and Eli for the locket. His voice grated. Or vengeance. Lorelei touched the pendant. Then, We give them what they want. His gaze snapped to hers, flare of anger and fear. You didn't start this. They took your family because of me, she said, voice steady despite shaking limbs. I won't pay that price. Cal's fists unclenched. Not surrender, exchange. I ride under flag of truce, trade me for them. Strickland knows my worth on these. Ranges, cattle drives, land arbitration. He'll see coin in keeping me alive. He'll kill you, Lorelei protested. Then we plan better. Cal's eyes hardened. Holt cattle remudas graze along Dry River. Wranglers loyal. We raise a posse. Ride at dawn. His gaze dropped to her locket. But you stay here. No, she said, surprising herself with the steel in the word. If you go, I go. Cal's mouth opened to argue, then closed. Something in her eyes must have shown the futility. He nodded once, curt. They spent the night gathering what weapons remained, one battered scattergun, a handful of cartridges, Marion's. Small caliber rifle. Cal patched the wagon's bullet-scarred flank with stove tin, loaded hay for the team. Lorelei doused smoldering embers, bound her ruined gown at the waist with rope, turned Cal's bandana into a makeshift sling for extra ammunition. Dawn bled gray across the land. Snow crouched in gullies, wind teeth sharp. Cal traced hoof. Prints south by lantern light until they dropped into the cattail marsh by the river. The tracks vanished among reed pools. He cursed softly. They know we'll follow. Covered their trail. He knelt, sifted cold mud. Still wet, hours ahead. A shout rang upland. Men ranch hands rode in, 7 of them, led by a wiry cowboy named Finch. They smelled the smoke, saw the ruin, came ready. Cal told them everything in few words. Finch spat. Strickland's a known bummer. Texas blood feud came north last spring. Heard he's buying lawmen like penny candy. The posse formed quick. Rifles checked, canteens filled, sandwiches crammed. Into pockets. Lorelei stood amid hardened cowboys, Colt in hand, and felt strangely calm. Cal climbed into the wagon seat, reins in fists. They'll expect riders. Wagon might surprise. Finch nodded. We cut ahead through Bitterroot Gulch. Try box 'em. You keep the lady behind you, boss. I ride up front. Lorelei's voice cut across the dawn. Finch looked at Cal. Cal met her. Gaze challenge, respect, and slid over, leaving space beside him. She climbed up, wrapped in the saddle blanket. The posse wheeled south. Wagon followed. Snow squealed under iron rims. In Lorelei's lap, the locket felt heavier than ever. A pocketful of justice owed, paid now in blood. They crossed Bitterroot Ridge by noon. Clouds broke. Sun glared off drifts. Finch's riders found the kidnappers. Camp within a cluster of cottonwoods strung with prayer. Cloth left by Shoshone travelers. A place meant for peace. Yet the scene below was anything but. Marion and Eli knelt beside the fire, wrists bound. Strickland himself paced before them, duster pristine, hat brim low. 8 gunmen lounged about, rifles on knees. The silver-mounted shotgun glinted in Strickland's grasp. Finch signaled positions. Cal halted the wagon under cover of cedar scrub. Lorelei's heart hammered, but her hands were steady. She checked the Colt. 5 chambers full, hammer on the ma. Empty. Cal squeezed her shoulder. Stay behind the wheel. When shooting starts, drive wagon across their flank, kick dust, break sight lines. She nodded. Terror still clung, but something fiercer now rode with it. Purpose. He dismounted, strode. Into the clearing alone, hands raised. Ween tugged his coat. Sunlight raked the bruise on his jaw, souvenir of the bridge chase. Strickland laughed when he saw the rancher. Ah, the Samaritan who ferried my runaway bride. You ride in quick circles, Mr. Holt. I brought what you came. For, Cal said, and a trade, my life for theirs. He jerked his chin at Marion and Eli. Lorelei's breath lodged in her throat. Strickland arched a brow. Noble, but I hold the stronger hand. Cal's gaze flicked toward the wagon. Lorelei swallowed. Fear. With one smooth motion, she vaulted to the driver's bench, snapped the reins. The sorrels bolted, wagon careening into the clearing, wheels spewing mud. Men shouted. Strickland spun. Lorelei yanked the brake, skidded broadside dust-cloaked. The fire. Finch's riders burst from cottonwoods, rifles cracking. Chaos bloomed. Lorelei crouched behind the wagon wheel, Colt steady. A gunman charged. She fired. Bullet struck thigh. He fell screaming. Another aimed from behind a stump. She dropped flat as his shot chipped the wagon rim. Cal's Winchester barked, silencing the stump. She crawled, skirts snagging on brush. Reached Marion and Eli. Marion's eyes storm gray like Cal's widened. Lorelei cut their bonds with a pocket knife. Finch tossed her. Run to the wagon, she ordered. Eli clung to her hand small, trembling but brave. Gunfire roared. Strickland shouted orders, but his men wavered under the sudden two-front assault. Dust and black powder smoke turned the clearing into a nightmare maze. Lorelei pushed Marion and Eli into the wagon, then turned, just as Strickland emerged from smoke, shotgun raised. Little Lorelei, he drawled, voice slick with triumph. Did you really think you could escape Providence and me? She leveled the Colt. This ends now, Jeremiah. He smirked, thumbed the shotgun's lever. Agreed. Thunder boomed. The shotgun fired. Lorelei flinched, but no pain. Behind her, the wagon wheel exploded in splinters. Strickland had aimed low to disable her cover, not kill outright. He advanced, eyes wild. Give me the locket. Lorelei stood, shoulders square despite the trembling. She unclasped the chain, held the locket up. Strickland's gaze locked on it. Obsessed. Cal surged from behind the tent, tackled him. The shotgun discharged skyward, tearing a cottonwood branch. Strickland rolled, drew a Derringer, the twin of the one Wade discarded inches from Cal's rib. Lorelei's scream split the canopy. Instinct overrode thought. She raised the Colt, firing blindly. The bullet struck the Derringer, ripped it from Strickland's grasp, ricocheting into the fire pit where sparks leapt like startled birds. Cal seized the moment, slammed Strickland's head against a fallen log. The lawyer sagged, dazed, but two gunmen broke through Finch's line, rushing Lorelei. She stumbled back, hammer cocking, but the cylinder jammed on splintered grit. She struggled. Eli shrieked. A rifle cracked. One gunman dropped. Marion, kneeling under the wagon, shivered as smoke curled from the small caliber rifle in her hands. The last gunman hesitated. Finch tackled him, butt stroked to the jaw. Silence fell, broken only by moans of the wounded and panting horses. Smoke lifted, revealing the carnage. 3 dead gunmen, 4 wounded. Finch's posse suffered cuts and a graze. Cal knelt on Strickland's chest, breathing hard, blood trickling from a cut in his temple. Lorelei approached, locket still clutched. Strickland glared up, hate raw. That locket won't convict me. Courts out here belong to whoever pays. Cal looked to Lorelei. She felt the prairie wind between them, carrying possibility. Territory courts, maybe, she said, voice steady. But Boston papers love a sensational trial. And Pinkerton still have a bullet with your name. Strickland spat blood. You won't get me to Boston. Cal stood, hauled him upright. Marshal Service'll see to that. Finch bound Strickland and surviving gunmen. Marion hugged Cal, tears and smoke streaking her cheeks. Eli clung to Lorelei, eyes round. The snow had ceased. Sunlight speared through clouds, gilding the chaos like mercy. Cal turned to Lorelei. You all right? She laughed ragged, disbelieving. I think so. She lifted the locket between them. We both have burdens to set down. He nodded, touched the pendant gently. Together then. Lightning did not split the sky, but Lorelei felt something shift, an unspoken promise forged in the fire and gun smoke. Finch's riders gathered prisoners. Salvaged weapons stamped out coals. Cal lifted Lorelei into the wagon seat, helped Marion and Eli climbing back. He took the reins. They rolled north toward Solace Creek, leaving Strickland's ambitions in ashes. Behind them, horizon flamed rose and gold, the world reinventing itself. Yet Lorelei knew night still held claws. Courts were far, roads perilous, and power rarely surrendered without blood. The journey had only begun. But as Cal's gloved hand brushed hers on the reins, she realized fear was lighter shared and hope. Heavier but sweetest load of all. Ahead, a lone hawk-wheeled sky stretched wide and the prairie exhaled, whispering possibilities, greater than cliffhanger, as the wagon traced the ridge back toward Solace Creek. Unseen on the far horizon, a telegraph rider spurred a fresh Mustang. Eastward, Strickland's contingency plan sealed in his coat. The message he carried promised a bounty so rich it would set half the territory ablaze. Lorelei felt a chill crawl her spine, though she could not yet name it. Trouble was not done chasing the torn dress girl, and the quiet rancher trouble had only just saddled up. Somewhere behind her, a coupler slammed into place with a metallic pang that echoed through the derelict station house, and Lorelei Gable flinched so hard her forehead bumped the dusty glass. For an instant her vision blurred with stars, a constellation, skittering across the unbecoming reflection of a woman who looked far more like an abandoned ghost than a debutante who had left St. Louis only 5 days ago with wedding gifts packed in tissue and hope folded neatly between layers of tulle. Train wheezed its last. A scorched plume of steam drifted past the window and dissolved into the endless gray wash of evening, leaving the whistle's dying note to hang in the air like the tail of a prayer no one had the courage to finish. Beyond the rotted platform, the prairie stretched unbroken, golden grass shivering beneath the breath of a storm that was building on the western rim of the world. Thunder rumbled there like drums from another age, ominous, reverent, promising. Lorelei's heartbeat answered each distant roll. She rose unsteadily, silk slippers torn now, the left one without a ribbon catching on splinters between boards. The hem of her ruined gown brushed grit and broken glass, collecting anarchy in what had once been a masterpiece of haute couture. In the dim corridor, the other passengers jostled past her with the frantic energy of those determined not to linger. One moment longer than necessary in a nowhere stop called Bleakridge. She heard a woman mutter "poor creature" as a gloved hand guided 2 children around her as though she were contagion. The conductor's lantern appeared above the seats, slicing the gloom. He did not slow. "Last call," he barked without looking. At Lorelei, train departs in 5. 5 heartbeats, she thought. 5 heartbeats, and the only proof I ever existed in the world before this moment will disappear down that track. Tremor took her fingers as she felt for the telegram again, crumpled in the small beaded clutch that still, miraculously, clung to her wrist by its chain. She didn't remove it. The words were carved behind her eyes. Asterisk, asterisk, Lorelei, stop regret, impossible, stop father's position ruined, stop marriage. Cannot proceed, stop fare paid to Bleakridge, only stop Godspeed, asterisk, asterisk. It had arrived in Sedalia, asterisk, with regrets, asterisk, delivered by an apologetic porter just as she'd finished her supper in the dining car. Since then she had been drifting, a pale feather in backdraft, convinced at every junction that someone would appear to explain the cruel joke. But the whistle screamed and the miles rolled under steel, and no explanation came. Now Bleakridge was all that remained. Lorelei stepped onto the platform. Heat radiated from the boards, though the sun was gone, as if the earth itself clung to memories of daylight. Luggage thumped onto the planks behind her other people's luggage. She had none. The porters in Sedalia had kindly forwarded her trunks back east since her ticket no longer passed their manifest past Bleakridge. She carried only the clutch, a ripped velvet reticule containing what coins she possessed, and the intangible weight of humiliation. Wind tugged at the dangling sleeve of her dress. She folded her arms tight, gaze flicking across the platform. It was nearly deserted. An old telegraph agent shutting the window. A freckled boy kicking a ball of newsprint. 2 ranch hands unloading crates of tack dot, and a man. He leaned against the hitching rail beyond the freight scale, a hat brim shadowing half his face. Broad, shouldered, solitary, motionless as a carving in weathered sandstone, only the slow rhythm of his thumb along the worn leather of a saddle blanket suggested life. A roan gelding dozed beside him, reins looped casually, trusting that something in his stillness unnerved Lorelei more than the empty horizon. People in St. Louis never stood so quietly. They were always in the act of becoming, hurrying toward consequence. This stranger seemed already arrived, as though he'd stepped out of the prairie fully formed and saw no reason to announce himself. She tried to look away, failed. Her stare caught on the curl of dark hair touching his collar, on the dust that coated his boots, on the way the purple dusk sculpted his jaw. He did not return her regard. "Miss?" The conductor had reappeared, breath-fogging lantern glass. "Train departs," she swallowed. Words perched brittle on her tongue. I have no ticket forward. I have nowhere to go. Put shame as a violent jailer. She nodded instead, as though everything were in order, and watched the conductor retreat with a slight frown. The locomotive coughed, pistons clattered, steam swallowed the platform. A minute later the last car rattled past, and the clack of wheels faded into distant silence. It felt so absolute Lorelei wondered if the world itself had been exiled. She could hear her own pulse, the creak of the horse's leather, the raspy rattle of thornbush in the ghost wind. Night birds started their mournful choir. Tears burned, hot, immediate, but she forced them back. Not here. She would not break in front of strangers. She squared her shoulders, turned toward the station house, and stepped off the platform. Her slipper snagged a gap. Wood gave with a wet crack. She pitched forward and landed hard on both knees in cinders. Pain blossomed white. The clutch skittered. Dignity shattered. A boot scuffed gravel near her ear. She flinched and looked up. He stood over her now, the stranger, tall enough to eclipse what remained of twilight. The lamplight at the depot door finally touched his face. Sun-browned. Skin, high cheekbones. Eyes dark as walnut and just as unreadable. A weak stubble cast silver flecks when the lantern swung. He regarded her without alarm or pity-only notice. "I'm fine," Lorelei began, and hated the breathless tremor in her voice. "Please, His gaze left her and tracked the torn seam that bared one shoulder, the dried blood where creosote had grazed her elbow, the foolish slippers ruined beyond saving. A muscle ticked once in his jaw. Then he crouched, gathering the clutch, the reticule. He offered them without comment. Close now she smelled horsewheat and sage, the faint ghost of tobacco. His hands were large but uncalloused strength, without brutality. She accepted the items mutely. He straightened, shrugged something from his shoulder, and draped it over her like a mantle. Thick wool, striped crimson and cream, smelling of cedar smoke and grass after rain. His saddle blanket. Warmth wrapped her instantly, shocking after the chill of exposed silk. "I can't," she started. "Take it." A baritone, low and weather, softened, yet decisive enough to brook no dispute. She closed her mouth. Footsteps approached. The telegraph agent, wiry and gray-sleeved, curiosity pinching his brows. "Saw the train pull out," he said, eyeing Lorelei with what might have been concern or calculation. "Miss, you need the hotel?" "Only one. But my sister keeps it clean." Lorelei gathered the blanket tighter. She opened her mouth. Nothing came. The stranger answered instead. "It's full." The agent blinked. "Beg pardon, Mr. Holt." Drovers from the M-Bar wagon camp took they. "Last rooms at noon." He shifted so his coat parted, revealing the starched fronts of a charcoal vest, a watch chain glinting. Not a drifter, then something steadier. The agent scratched his head. Well, that's a shame. Next stage east comes Thursday. I could wire. She ride with me. It was not a suggestion. It was fact recognized before voiced. The kunda. Agent's eyes widened a fraction, but he only tugged his visor. As you say, evening then. He retreated hastily to his office. Lorelei found her voice. I cannot impose. I have no resources. Truly, you needn't trouble yourself. My name's Silas Holt. The way he said it carried the weight of a handshake without him lifting a finger. My ranch is 15 miles north. Mrs. Whitcomb keeps a spare room. You can rest there. Figure what comes next. What comes next? Lorelei echoed, tasting the words like foreign fruit. Silas tipped his hat just enough for lamplight to find his eyes. In them she saw neither pity nor design, only quiet. Standing on this platform, isn't it? Wind keened across the empty rails, scattering grit. Rain smelled close, sharp, inevitable. Lorelei looked at the blinking red light far down the track where the train had vanished. Then at the shadow sea of prairie, her throat closed. She nodded once. Silas's horse Cinder, he called her, accepted the additional rider with mild curiosity. He swung into the saddle and extended an arm. Lorelei hesitated only a moment before letting him pull her up behind him. She sat side saddle, clutching blanket and reticule. The warmth of his back bled through linen and into her spine. They rode. Night swallowed Bleakridge within minutes. Crickets surged, coyotes yipped distantly. Thunderhead bellies glowed with heat, lightning that spidered across unborn rain. Cinder carried them at a ground-eating lope, hooves muffled by turf. Every so often Silas pointed there, a windmill skeleton. There, the flash of water in a stock pond under sheet lightning. Always in silence until Lorelei could no longer bear the press of unspoken questions. Why help me? She asked, voice half lost to wind. His shoulders moved in what might have been a shrug. Storm coming. She waited. No elaboration came. At last she said, Storm's End. Silas's chuckle was so soft she felt it rather than heard it. You ever seen one out here? Lightning sets grass afire on one horizon while rain drowns the other. Some storms change the land. Lorelei imagined a wall of flame racing over hillocks, devouring nests and promises alike. She imagined her life in St. Louis a charred artifact. Now, then what remains? Whatever had roots deep enough to hold. His words settled between them like an unasked vow. Miles later, the prairie surrendered to fencing, the Holt Ranch, marked by cedar posts and looping wire that glimmered under lightning. A lantern glowed on a porch ahead. Silas slowed Cinder to a trot, then a walk. Dogs barked. Two shapes bounded into the light, tails wagging more than voices menacing. Silas dismounted and lifted Lorelei down before she realized his intent. Her feet touched packed earth, dizzying after so many miles balanced in motion. A stout woman in calico hurried from the doorway, drying hands on her apron. Land sakes, Mr. Holt, we weren't expecting. Oh. Her gaze took in Lorelei's dress, the blanket, the raw scrapes. Child, what happened? Trouble at the depot, Silas answered. She's lodging till we sort it. Mrs. Whitcomb, housekeeper, cook, and equal parts mother hen and steel trap, guided Lorelei inside. Warm lamplight revealed a tidy parlor. Woven rugs, bookcases groaning. A stone hearth where coals glowed, even in July twilight. The smell of yeast rolls and pepper gravy lingered. Lorelei's knees quivered. Mrs. Whitcomb noticed, steering her toward a padded chair. Sit before you fall. I'll fetch water heating. Mr. Holt, see to the dogs. Silas inclined his head and stepped back out, shadow folding him. Lorelei's eyes stung smoke, exhaustion, relief. She traced patterns in the rug to keep tears at bay. Minutes later, steam curled from a porcelain washbowl. On a small table, Mrs. Whitcomb returned with salve, a clean chemise, and scissors. That dress is beyond mending tonight. Mind if I shorten it? Can't have you tripping. Lorelei found herself nodding again. The older woman's efficiency soothed her more than any murmured sympathy. Silk parted under the scissors' bite. Warm water almost scalded but cleansed the grit from her skin. Mrs. Whitcomb slathered arnica on bruises, wrapped gauze around worse scrapes. You got a name, dear? Lorelei Gable. Well, Miss Gable, you'll sleep in the south room. Spare clothes of mine till we fit you proper. Breakfast at sunup, Mrs. Whitcomb, Lorelei whispered. I have no money. The woman's brows rose. Did I ask? For any? She fluffed a pillow with finality. Being human, as not a debt. She left with the ruined gown folded over an arm. Lorelei slipped into the chemise, clean and coarse, but blessedly intact. She sank onto the bed feather, soft, yet solid, listening to the house settle. Boards creaked, wind sighed. Somewhere a clock ticked. She had not realized until this exact heartbeat how violently alone she'd been since Sedalia, how every muscle had clenched around that loneliness. Tears came then, silent, endless, soaking the blanket that still smelled of prairie and smoke. Soft knock. She sat up, swiping eyes. Silas stood in the doorway, hat in hand, candle lantern casting his features in amber relief. Brought your things. He set the clutch and reticule on the dresser. His gaze paused on her face, saw grief, exhaustion. Something else, yet as always betrayed no judgment. Thank you, she managed. He nodded, thumb brushing the brim. You sleep. Dogs'll keep watch. House is stout. He hesitated. Sometimes. The storm sounds worse than it is. Don't let it spook you. She almost laughed. Lightning and thunder were gentle compared with telegrams and abandonment. Instead, she whispered, I'll try. Silas closed the door. The latch clicked. Footsteps retreated down the hall. Lorelei lay back, staring at shadows thrown by the lantern. Rain began, a tentative tapping that built into a roar on the roof. Wind howled through chinks. Heat lightning flashed, illuminating rafters for a heartbeat at a time. She should sleep. Yet her mind churned a storm within the storm, questions. Flung like hailstones, what next? How to repay kindness? Where to find dignity in tatters? A louder crack split the night. The dogs burst into growls. Footsteps thudded on the porch. Too heavy to be Silas returning. Lorelei bolted upright. Floorboards vibrated. A murmur of rough voices seeped through walls. She reached for the lantern, snuffing the wick to darkness. Her pulse pounded. Thunder answered. Through the rain she heard a shout. Holt, come out, we got business. Glass shattered a window somewhere up the hall. The dog's snarls turned to yelps, then silence. Another voice, meaner. Tie him. Quick. Terror stunned her a moment. Then Lorelei slipped from the bed, felt along the dresser until her fingers found the reticule. Inside, among coins, her hand touched a cold iron shape, the derringer her father insisted she carried during the journey, though she had never fired a weapon. She drew it, thumbed the hammer. It clicked into half-cock, the way the porter had shown her. Footsteps stomped closer, boot heels on hardwood, rough breathing, the thump of a body dragged. Lightning flashed through rain-soaked curtains, and Lorelei saw silhouettes loom outside her door. She raised the pistol with shaking hands as the latch began to turn, and a voice she recognized growled, "Touch that door and the girl dies." First, silence, heartbeats. In the hall someone cursed softly. The latch stilled. "Lorelei?" Silas's voice muffled, strained. "Are you hurt?" She swallowed, forcing calm. "I'm uninjured." Beyond the door, another man laughed. "Won't be for long. Holt, you hand over them deeds or we burn the place and everyone in it." Deeds? Lorelei's mind raced. Land? Cattle? She tightened her grip on the derringer. Silas answered, icy and unafraid. "Set one flame and you guarantee we're all ghosts by dawn." Lorelei sensed movement. A shadow slipped away from the door, bootsteps retreating. Rain hammered. Thunder bellowed. then dash asterisk crack. Asterisk a rifle shot exploded, splintering timber in the hallway. Dust mushroomed under the door. Lorelei bit back a scream. The gang whooped. Clock's ticking, rancher. Someone hollered, "We'll start with the mare in the barn. Maybe roast her foal for breakfast." Lightning flashed again, and through the shattered hall window Lorelei caught sight of torches bobbing toward the barn. She had never fired a gun. She had never ridden to war or faced men with murder in their throats. Yet the image of Cinder Gentle, patient, life-saving, trapped in flames, snapped something within her. Lorelei Gable eased the hammer to full cock. She crossed the room, tore a blanket strip, tied her hair back. She opened the dresser drawer, found a coil of baling twine useful. She slid the derringer into the sling of her chemise, lifted the lantern, and flung the door wide. The hallway lay in riot. Wallpaper slashed, smoke curling from bullet-gouged beams. The overturned hall stand bleeding drawers like entrails. Silas knelt near the stairs, wrists bound, lips split. 2 men loomed with rifles. A third kept watch on Mrs. Whitcomb, who huddled at the landing clutching a cast-iron skillet. All 3 intruders pivoted toward Lorelei as she stepped into view. Lantern held high, chemise whipping about her knees, saddle blanket flowing from her shoulders like some half-forgotten banner, and she smiled slow, deliberate, unsettling even to herself. "Gentlemen," she said, voice ablate in silk, "kindly move away from Mr. Holt." They stared, confusion breaking into ugly grins. The largest cocked his rifle. "Or what, Duchess?" Lorelei's free hand slid beneath the blanket. Thunder timed itself precisely, drowning the click of her derringer's trigger sliding back. She let the lantern fall, glass shattered, kerosene splashing, flame leaping across the soaked rug toward the men like a living curse. Chaos. Silas lunged up as rifle swung, ropes snapping from sudden leverage. Mrs. Whitcomb's skillet rang like a church bell off a skull. Lorelei leveled the derringer at the second man's knee, praying the powder was still dry, and fired. The hallway filled with gun smoke and screams. Downstairs, more boots pounded reinforcements. Somewhere outside the barn erupted in panicked whinnies. Lightning painted the world white. Lorelei sucked acrid air into her lungs, readying the second barrel. Behind her the staircase groaned. She spun just as a 4th invader reached the top. Step, eyes blazing and revolver cocked. She had no time to aim. Instinct screamed. She fired, and thunder answered. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow I have a special story for you." The dawn that filtered through the warping planks of the cattle car was the color of old parchment, stained by smoke rising from smoldering grass fires somewhere to the east. Lorelei Gable woke to the judder of iron wheels beating time on cracked rail joints and the lowing protest of Angus steers penned only a few yards away. She had slept sitting up, back braced against a slat wall, boots still laced, revolver balanced across her lap in a practiced cross-draw grip she never would have imagined herself learning even a week earlier. The sluggish pulse in her wrists told her she was alive. The stink of manure confirmed she was still somewhere between desolation and perdition. She blinked grit from her lashes and scanned the dim interior. Silas Rowe, quiet rancher, unexpected champion, man of so many restless shadows, sat opposite. Her hat brim tipped low, arms folded over a broad chest that rose and fell in slow, even cadence. He looked carved from the same dark timber that framed the stock car, as if sleep were merely another kind of vigil. Outside, a coyote's lonely yip spiraled upward, answered by the hiss of steam whenever the tired locomotive labored around a bend. They had boarded the westbound freight under cover of night to evade Sheriff Barrow's deputies' men, bribed by Wilkes Penderton. Lorelei's would have been groom, to drag her back to St. Louis before talk of the canceled society. Wedding stained his family's silver. Barrow's badge might shine with county authority, but his soul was lined with Penderton money. Every mile Lorelei and Silas stole now put another rifle behind them. But Dawn always found fugitives. She shifted, stiff joints cracking like distant gunshots, and for an instant imagined she felt Penderton's palm clamp around her wrist again, cold as the diamond he'd replaced affection with. The memory set her pulse skating. She forced herself to catalog the present: wood, iron, dust. Silas, real, immediate, survivable. Silas stirred as though he had been awake all along. He lifted his hat. Gray eyes, calm as distant thunderheads, reassessed her scars both fresh and invisible. "You didn't dream easy," he murmured. "I didn't dream at all." She lied. A corner of his mouth acknowledged the falsehood without. Pushing. Freight slows ahead. Conductor says there's a siding near Quail Run where they'll split cars. That's where we leave the rails? He nodded. Cut west across the draw. 2 hard days to Bitter Mesa, then one up the plateau to my spread. Horses waiting in an arroyo. Supplies cached. Penderton's posse rides flat-wheel nags. They can't follow where we'll climb. Lorelei studied the man who had, with a single battered saddle blanket and a muttered apology, offered her decency in the hour she needed it most. She still didn't know why he had crushed his own coat against her shivering shoulders outside that condemned station house. A stranger defending a stranger, but she knew the look. Penderton had worn the last time their gazes crossed. Entitlement. Turned predatory. Silas Rowe had confronted that look with something flat and deadly behind his eyes, and Penderton had stepped back. Money feared certain kinds of silence. The train groaned as the engineer feathered the throttle. Between boards, Lorelei glimpsed sun-blasted grass and the skeletal remains of a telegraph pole line curling toward oblivion. She rubbed the smithy's mark on her borrowed Colton Suf-shaped flourish, etched just forward of the cylinder. Silas had taught her to shoot at dusk 3 nights back, patient as snowfall, correcting her stance with minimal touch. She had dropped 4 tin plates in a row. Her wrists still buzzed from the recoil. She wasn't sure whether the trembling that had followed was adrenaline or the proximity of his voice at her ear. The cattle car clanked across a switch. Silas rose, bracing with one hand as the deck lurched. 10 minutes, maybe less. He said, "Gather your nerve." She slid the revolver into the pocket she had sewn into the ripped side seam of her riding skirt, cinched her belt, and followed him to the sliding door. He worked the latch with gloved fingers and eased the panel open just wide enough for prairie wind to punch through. The chill reminded her July nights could still gnaw bone when altitude replaced humidity. The siding came into view ahead, a decrepit gravel spur beside an abandoned ore loader, its gantry leaning like an old drunk framing the horizon. Silas scanned the tree line. Nothing moved but the tattered shadow of a hawk. The train emitted a final exhausted sigh and crawled to a stop. "Now," he said. They jumped. Dust burst around their boots. Lorelei staggered. Silas caught her elbow, steadying without lingering. They hurried beneath the angled skeleton of the ore chute, the locomotive's whistle crying once, forlorn, before brakes squealed and couplers clanged. Then the beast rumbled onward, dragging its snorting cargo toward Cheyenne. Sheet iron silence descended. Silas led the way across knee-high grass toward a finger of cottonwoods marking Quail Run. Midsummer drought had choked the creek to a whisper, but its twisting bank still offered cover. They slipped into its cut, shoulders brushing clay walls, and followed shade until the land steepened. Lorelei's boots slipped more than once on scree. Silas offered a palm each time. Neither spoke. Words felt fragile as butterfly wings in that raw hush. By noon the sun hammered straight overhead. They paused beneath an overhang where he had cached supplies. 2 rough-coated Mustangs, saddled and picketed beneath pinnon, bedrolls lashed with canteens, a burlap sack of hardtack and jerky. Lorelei ran a hand down the red gelding's mane. The horse flicked an ear, accepting. Name's Flint. Silas said. Stubborn, but footing sure. And the mare? Ember, faster than she looks. He patted the bay. She suits you. Loralee smiled despite chapped lips. Because I look slow? Because you burn quiet. Bedrolls loaded. Rifles checked, they mounted and nudged up, slope. The world narrowed to dust plumes and the creak of leather. Silas kept an easy pace, but Lorelei sensed urgency coiled beneath each measured stride. Penderton's coin bought desperation, and desperation loved shortcuts. She pictured Sheriff Barrow's hulking silhouette, remembered the way his hand had crushed her father's bequest letter against his vest sealing a transaction. Justice exchanged for favor. She tasted bile. The land tilted steeper, juniper. Replaced prairie grass and broken stone jutted like bleached ribs. Hours passed uncounted. In the late afternoon, heat haze shimmered across the endless escarpment to the west. Bitter Mesa, a basalt plateau that rose like a fortress bred by. Thunder dotted its base. Silas dismounted beside a sheer crease in the rock, a narrow defile half hidden by scrub oak. He produced a stub of candle, struck a match, and ducked inside. Lorelei followed. The cleft tunneled 20 paces, then opened into a concealed box canyon cut from the mesa's underside. A spring trickled down one wall, pooling in a moss-plated basin ringed by maidenhair ferns. Impossibly green. Silas dipped a canteen, drank, then filled a tin cup and offered it. Cold water bit the back of Lorelei's throat. She gasped, grateful. Above, daylight slanted through the slot in dusty shafts. Glancing off a ledge where thick cedar planks bridged a natural gap, Silas noticed her gaze. Old mining footpath. He explained. Leads to the top. Hard climb, but once there, we're ghosts. Lorelei set the cup down. Her hand shook. Silas, why did you help me, truly? He considered, removing his hat, running calloused fingers through sweat. Hair. Because I saw a woman standing alone in a tornado of men's greed. And because. His jaw clenched, words caught behind muscle. Finally, because once someone wrapped a coat around my sister, and I was too late to thank that stranger. Silence bowed between them. The spring's drip kept time. Above, distant, a pebble skittered. Both froze. Another, the unmistakable scuff of boot. Leather on stone. Penderton's posse had found the defile. Silas snuffed the candle, eyes adjusting. He motioned her to crouch behind a tumble of ore tailings. From a saddlebag he drew a Spencer carbine, levering around. Lorelei slipped her Colt free, thumbed the hammer. Shadows lengthened, so did dread. Voices filtered down. Sheriff Barrow's guttural curse. Another man's wheeze. Their footfalls clanged along the cedar. Bridge above, then halted. Lorelei's breath sawed ragged. She recalled Silas's lesson. Exhale slow, steady the sights. But terror muffled memory. Barrow spoke, his drawl oiled with arrogance. Penderton figures the lady ain't fit for ranch dust. Rowe says to bring her home washed or buried. He don't mind which. Silas answered with the cocking of the Spencer. Echoes swallowed the sound, but Lorelei heard resolve heavier than lead. More boots arrived. Timbers groaned overhead. Lorelei slid across gravel to Silas's side, whisper, thin. There's too many. He shook his head once. They're hemmed in. Only way down is past our muzzles. A rifle cracked, sparking stone near his shoulder. They flattened. Splinters rained. Reckon that's a warning shot, Barrow taunted. Next one'll carry your heart out your back. Lorelei's fingertips found Silas's sleeve. We have to move. A second voice, reedy, half-drunk, called. Sheriff, there's dynamite crates left from the mining days. We drop 'em, cave the witch in. Dynamite. Lorelei's pulse shot up her throat. She met Silas's eyes. The calm there steadied her like a hand on the spine. He scanned the box canyon quickly, mind-mapping slopes and ricochets. Then he breathed two words that felt colder than the spring water. They'll do it. Wood above groaned again as more weight crowded the bridge. Pebbles sifted down, ticking off stones. "Silas," Lorelei whispered, "if they blast that ledge, the whole roof comes down. We're buried." "And so are they." A pause. He looked at her. In that sliver of waning day, she saw lives unspoken: grief, grit, gratitude. "Ride out the back chute," he said. "Follows water to daylight a quarter-mile north. Take the horses. Ride for the plateau rim. There's a lightning splintered juniper wait there." No. Even she was surprised by her certainty. "Lorelei, you wrapped a blanket around me when the world mocked my torn dress. You don't get to order me to leave your side now." His jaw worked. Somewhere above, the posse debated fuses. Barrow's impatience cracked like tinder. "Light it." Silas pivoted, swiping the candle stub. With flint from his pocket, he sparked it alive, shielding flame with his hand. "Fine, then we move together." He motioned left toward ladder of protruding shale bits zigzagging the canyon wall beneath the cedar bridge. "You're going up there?" We reclaimed the high ground before they dropped the first charge. The plan was madness made flesh, but Lorelei found herself nodding. Silas blew out the candle, wedged it between teeth, shouldered the Spencer, and began climbing. She followed, fingers clawing holds that crumbled, heart hammering like hooves. Halfway up, a fuse sizzled above. Smoke slithered down like a demon's. Whisper. Silas hooked an arm over the last ledge and heaved up, rolling to his feet. Lorelei scrambled after. She landed on knees, gun slipping, and found herself face to face with Sheriff Barrow. The man was enormous, sweat darkening his duster, eyes glinting pig bright. He held a Winchester, but dynamite crackled in his left hand, flame creeping toward nitroglycerin. "Even in this," he crooned. Silas stepped between them. "Barrow, don't be stupid." "Stupid?" Barrow's grin widened. "Stupid is thinking you can steal Penderton's property and trot off into some fairy tale sunset. Stupid is." Lorelei surged up and slammed her revolver across the fuse, snuffing it. Barrow lurched back, cursing, smoke singeing his beard. Gunfire erupted, Silas's Spencer roaring like artillery. Men dove for cover. Crystals of sunset-lit dust boiled skyward. Barrow staggered, shoulder torn, but not felled. He swung the Winchester. Buttstock caught Silas's temple. Blood spattered cedar. He fell to one knee. "Silas!" Lorelei fired twice. Her first shot ricocheted, second nicked Barrow's gun hand. The sheriff howled and released the Winchester, but not the dynamite. A posse gunner lunged for the fallen rifle. Silas, half stunned, clubbed the man with the Spencer's barrel. Wood cracked. The rifle jammed. Lorelei grabbed Silas's arm, dragging him backward across splitting planks toward the shaft of a ventilation chimney that dropped into black depths. Every board beneath them shivered. Barrow bellowed orders, blood soaking sleeve. He ignited a second fuse with shaking fingers and hurled the sputtering stick toward Silas. Instinct shredded thought. Silas wrapped Lorelei in both arms and rolled. The dynamite tumbled past, clattering down the chimney, a breathless lull. Barrow's posse froze dot, then the earth convulsed. A boom like Thornton God's hammer cracked open the night. The bridge snapped. Timbers flew. A geyser of flame vomited up the vent. Smoke and debris swallowed shouts. Silas and Lorelei pitched sideways, slammed into stone, and slid toward the canyon's ragged rim as the bridge dissolved beneath them. Lorelei's fingernails scraped rock. She caught a root, shoulder screaming. Silas skidded past. Arm outstretched as fingers brushed hers. Then the ledge he clung to sheared off. He vanished into dust and sparks in a roar that stole air from lungs. "Silas!" She lunged, but the root tore loose. She tumbled, hit a slope, slid, and fetch it up against a cedar stump overlooking a maelstrom of rockfall and fire. She coughed, ears ringing. Below, the box canyon lay in ruins. Smoke billowed, burning planks bobbed in a churn of dust. Sheriff Barrow's men scrambled like ants over shattered stone, but there was no sign of Silas Rowe. The mesa trembled again, smaller cave-ins rippling outward. Lorelei forced sight through tears. The Spencer lay broken. Her revolver was gone. Sheriff Barrow, blackened and bleeding, climbed onto a stable ledge opposite her. His gaze tracked the destruction, then fixed on Lorelei alive, unbound. Still defying, his lips peeled back. "Penderton pays extra for ruin," he rasped. He drew a derringer from his boot, thumbed the hammer. Sunlight glinted off nickel. Lorelei had no gun, no path to Silas, no breath left for pleading. Only one desperate gasp of hope. The shaded defile behind her led into the plateau's heart, too narrow for Barrow's bulk, but traversable if she ran now. She pivoted, a rifle cracked like the finale of some savage symphony. Barrow's head snapped back, the derringer pinwheeled into dust. He crumpled, face first, arms splayed. Echoes stuttered away. Smoke thinned. Lorelei turned, heart in throat. Atop the far rim, silhouetted against molten sky, a lone figure knelt behind a scoped Sharp's long rifle. The man's hat brim hid his face, but in the slinged left arm and the set of his shoulders, Lorelei recognized Silas Rowe, bloodied, battered, impossibly alive. Relief surged just as another shadow rose behind Silas, lifting a pickaxe high. Above his back, she screamed too late. The pick glinted, arcing toward Silas's skull. The wind shifted at dusk, carrying the faint scent of river, silt up from the lowlands and laying it like a warning across the half-finished rail spur that arrowed toward Caldwell Ranch. For a moment Lorelei Gable thought it smelled like St. Louis in late spring, muddy, half wild, full of dangers no debutante was meant to see, and the sudden homesickness twisted deeper than any knife. She stood on the rise above the bunkhouse with Silas's saddle blanket, the very one he had draped across her shoulders the night they met, cinched tight around her frame. 2 nights had passed since the cattle car escape, and every hour since had been poured into fortifying the ranch against the storm of men Silas insisted was coming. Below her, lanterns swung between fence posts as ranch hands braced the new stretch of high wire. Sparks leapt from a forge where Gideon Park won, armed, rail thin, tough as a bed spring, hammered red-hot shoes for the remounts. Silas Caldwell moved among them with the quiet authority of a man born to held land together, sleeves rolled, hat pushed back, voice low and sure. Each time Lorelei's gaze found him, her pulse struck like a mallet on an anvil. He'd asked her to stay behind the bunkhouse wall, where there was cover, but she needed open sky tonight, needed to feel the cold wind on her cheeks and remember that she was alive, still breathing, still capable of choosing her own miracles. The rancher's coat, now hers by habit, smelled of cedar chips and gun oil. It steadied her heartbeat, even as the hoofbeats beyond the far ridge set it racing again. A distant shout carried up the draw. The horses whickered. Gideon straightened. At his forge, holding the glowing half-moon of iron against the night like a warning star, Lorelei reached for the Colt Navy that hung from the sash of her patched dress. Silas had insisted she carry it even to the cook tent, and took a slow, anchoring breath. 20 yards, she reminded herself, feeling the weight of the revolver, the way Silas had taught. Sight picture, squeeze, breathe again. Footsteps crunched behind her. Figured I'd find you chasing wind, Silas said, voice pitched low so the hired men wouldn't hear the catch in it. He stopped beside her, shoulder to shoulder, and the prairie hush folded around them. Lantern light painted faint copper along the hard plane of his jaw. "I'm not chasing," she murmured. "I'm scouting. That so? There's a sound out there." She angled her chin toward the shadowed ridge. Flat, rhythmic wagon axles, maybe 2 of them. If they're hauling drunk ranch hands, we tell the cook to make more. Chili. If they're hauling dynamite. Silas's palm brushed her elbow, wordless agreement. He smelled of horses and fresh planed lumber, and for an instant, the warmth of his touch made her ache with memories of satin gloves and ballroom waltz. Another Lorelei, another life, but the world had cracked, and this was the half she stood in now. Come on, he said. I want you under a roof before whatever's on that road shows its face. She stiffened. I won't hide. I'm not asking you to. His eyes found hers in the gloom. I'm asking you to choose the fight you can win. From the porch you'll have cover, and I'll sleep easier knowing your back's to a wall. The admission raw, unpolished struck harder than any iron bell. Lorelei felt heat bloom. In her chest, danger and wonder braided together. She could have argued. Instead she nodded, slid the blanket tighter around her shoulders, and let him lead her down the slope. They reached the ranch yard as the first wagon cleared the pines. It was no threat. A freight dray from Fort Grafton, hauling canvas-wrapped crates of seed wheat Silas had ordered weeks ago. The second wagon, rattling a full minute behind the first, was driven by Sister May of the Midnight Mission. Feeding orphans cost silver, she explained, and Caldwell Oats fetch it a fair price in town. Crisis averted, the yard exhaled. Lanterns bobbed back to their hooks. The forge hissed as Gideon drowned the shoe. Lorelei turned toward the porch, then paused. From the mission wagon's rear plank, a young girl in threadbare gingham stared at the ranch with desperate awe, clutching a rag doll against her ribs. Her feet were bare, her knuckles white where they gripped the wagon stake. Lorelei heard herself speak before thought caught up. Sister May, does she have a coat? The nun shook her head, wind lifting her gray habit. Or stockings, child. Winter took our last pair of both. Without hesitation, Lorelei unfastened Silas's saddle blanket and stepped to the wagon, wrapping the thick, weathered wool around the girl. The child's eyes widened green as new wheat, and something inside Lorelei cracked right down the fault line of her own childhood grief. Keep it, she whispered. It's magic against cold nights. The girl nodded solemnly, as if she understood the price of magic. Silas watched it all, saying nothing. But when Lorelei turned, he offered her his spare canvas jacket, patched, oil-stained, warm. She shrugged into it, swallowed gratitude, and met his gaze. I'd give you another blanket, he said, voice rough. But I've only got the one heart. Lorelei's breath caught. Before she could reply, a rifle cracked in the distant. Dark one shot, north fence line. Gideon barked an order. Hands scattered to posts. Silas's revolver leapt to his palm like a thought finding its sentence. The storm had begun. They made their stand at the north gate beneath a sky torn open by lightning. Barbed wires sang in the rising wind. The Sweetwater River, swollen from spring melt, roared 200 yards behind them, turning moonlight to jittering shards. The first attackers rode in singing bawdy trail songs, mercenaries hired by Garrett Ames, the railroad baron who wanted Caldwell land for a spur town full of saloons and cheap tenements. They thought intimidation would buy the deed. They were wrong. Silas met them at the gate, astride a lean dapple gray, rifle balanced across the saddle horn, ranch hands flanking him like weather-worn statues. Lorelei crouched behind the root cellar vent, pistol trained through a gap in the stonework. The iron of the Colt felt like ice. Evening, gentlemen, Silas called as the raiders fanned out a half-moon of rifles and hungry eyes. Y'all are early for spring branding. Range boss prefers callers knock at daylight. Range boss can kiss the spur, the lead rider sneered, lifting a torch. We're here for the Caldwell deed and the lady you been hidin'. 2 birds, 1 fire. Lorelei's vision tunneled. The lump of coal that had lodged in her chest the night she boarded that doomed wedding train flared hot fear burning into something ferocious. She thought of the barefoot girl, of Silas's lone heart, Of every time a man in fine clothes had tried to buy her silence, the torch arced upward, asterisk sight picture. She reminded herself. Squeeze, her shot shattered the torch before it could. Find pitch. Flaming oil spattered harmlessly across wet grass, winking out in the rain. The lead raider jerked backward, fingers streaked with blood. For one frozen breath, nobody moved. Then Silas fired. Chaos tore open. Thunder eclipsed thunder. Hoarse screams, human shouts, the staccato clatter of Gideon's Henry rifle from the hayloft. Lorelei worked the Colt as Silas had taught front sight. Steady exhale. Follow through each report, a line carved into the night. This far, no farther. The second wave never reached the gate. When the smoke cleared, 3 horses galloped, riderless into shadow. The remaining attackers limped retreat, dragging wounded pride like broken spurs. Rain drummed the gate timbers, washing blood into river mud. Gideon slumped against the loft rail. Spent shells scattered like cheap confetti around his boots. Silas dismounted, mud up to his knees, and strode to Lorelei's vent. His face, streaked with sweat and rain, shone with awful relief. "You all right?" he asked. She eased the Colt onto her lap. "Next time," she said, heart pounding. "I'd like a higher vantage point." A smile wry, shaken, cracked his grim mask. "We'll build a tower," he promised. "Tomorrow." Her pulse throbbed so loud she hardly heard him. She realized her cheeks were wet, not rain alone. The prairie had asked what she was willing to risk, and she had answered. Silas reached through the vent, his fingers brushing hers gentle in a way that felt more powerful than the rifle crack echoing still between hills. Something wordless passed between them, a vow not forged of altar vows or legal writs, but of smoke, mud, and midnight courage. They broke contact only when Gideon limped over, breathless. "Boss," he rasped, "we got a bigger problem." Asterisk bigger than torches and hired rifles? Lorelei thought, but the look in Gideon's eye turned her. Blood to hail. He pointed toward the river bottom where the Sweetwater's dark ribbon surged. Against its banks, bridge pilings, they're burning. Silas's head snapped toward the flash of orange deep in the cottonwoods. "If that bridge goes," Gideon said, "we can't move the herd come spring drive. We lose water rights and the county line fallback if Ames forecloses." Lorelei's mind raced. She saw the map Silas had shown her, the Sweetwater as lifeline, the drive route their last leverage. Without the bridge, the ranch was a noose. Tightening, Silas addressed Gideon first. "Take the hands, barrels, anything that holds water. I'll be there with the draft team." When he turned to Lorelei, his eyes were iron. "You'll stay with Sister May. Too much lead flying for you on the riverbank." "No," the word cut clear. "You need another rifle. And you need someone who can see past smoke my eyes. Are better. Lorelei, you asked me to choose the fight I can win." She holstered the Colt, reached for his Winchester leaning by the vent. "This one's mine." He looked at her, then really looked, and she saw the battle raging. Behind his steady gaze, protect the woman who'd saved his heart, or trust the warrior she'd chosen to become. Rain hammered the porch roof. The lantern along the gate guttered. Silas Caldwell handed Lorelei the Winchester. "This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story." She checked the chamber 5 rounds and slung a cartridge belt over her shoulder as thunder boomed up valley. Together they sprinted into the cottonwoods, past arcing wire, past Sister May's whispered prayers, past the edge of every life Lorelei had ever imagined for herself. Flames licked the bridge in hungry ribbons, heat rolling off creosote timbers like a furnace door flung wide. Silas shouted orders from the riverbank while Gideon's crew formed a bucket line. But the water they flung hissed useless against tarred pine. Lorelei scrambled up the embankment, boots sliding on clay. Smoke stung her lungs. Somewhere above, The roar she heard a rider spur away, probably the saboteur sent to report to Garrett Ames. But the shadows were too deep for a clean shot. She dropped, belly to plank, and inched across the shaking span. Sparks bit her sleeves. Beneath the boards, the sweet water slammed black water against pilings gone ruddy with pitch and flame. 15 yards ahead, a crate of blasting powder, Ames's calling card, sat wedged beneath the truss, fuse hissing an evil promise. Her heart stopped. 30 seconds, she guessed. Maybe less. She crab-crawled the last yards, fumbled for her knife, sawed at the fuse. The hemp sparked, spat, fizzled, and went out. She sagged, lungs burning, just as a charred beam groaned overhead. The truss shifted. A sheet of sparks rained down, scorching her scalp. Below, Silas saw it and roared her name. No time. She heaved the powder crate over the rail, watching it plummet into the torrent. White water swallowed it whole. Thunder reel this time rattled heavens. A lightning bolt ripped open the clouds, illuminating the whole scene in stark silver dot. In that flash Lorelei saw Silas scrambling up the embankment, arms outstretched. She rolled to her stomach, leveraged herself upright, and the bridge dropped. A full foot, maybe more. The far pilings began to shear. She ran. Planks exploded behind her. Heat clawed at her boots. Somewhere a horse screamed. She jumped. Silas caught her mid-air, momentum slamming them both into mud. The remainder of the span fell a heartbeat later, timbers crashing into black flood in a hellish spray of steam. They lay there, gasping, rain pelting their faces. His arms locked around her so tight she felt his pulse hammer against her ribs. She could speak, she whispered. Told you I needed a higher vantage. He laughed, then a short, raw sound that carried more promise than any vow, and pressed his forehead to hers. But the night was not finished. Single gunshot echoed across the broken bridge, and Gideon Park dropped to one knee, blood blooming on his shirt. Beyond him, under the twisted remnants of the south truss, a lone figure stepped into lightning flash-tailored coat, city hat, revolver smoking. Garrett Ames himself had come to finish the job. Lorelei's cry of warning was drowned by thunder. Silas shoved her behind a charred stump and stepped into the open, Winchester raised. The river hissed between them. Rain sheeted off the shattered span like a veil. Ames tipped his hat. Evening, Caldwell, he drawled, voice oily with triumph. Heard you hired yourself a station stray. Shame I'll have to break her heart along with your ranch. Silas's jaw clenched. This is your last chance to ride out, Ames. Last chances, the Baron mocked, cocking his weapon. That's rich coming from a man knee-deep in a river he can't cross. Lorelei wiped rain from the Winchester sights. She had 3 clear lines on Ames, all of them blocked by Silas. The Baron leveled his gun, eyes gleaming in lamplight. Tell the girl I said goodnight. Silas didn't flinch, and Lorelei knew the choice was hers, scream and warn him, giving Ames the reflex shot he craved, or trust the rancher's faith in her aim. Faith in the woman she had become in the span of one ragged heartbeat. She chose. She rose from behind the stump, rifle steady, breath locked against the wind, sight picture framing the darkness where Ames's pride lived unchecked. She squeezed out the night shattered, and everything went white, to be continued. That promise. Lorelei Gable tasted grit at the back of her throat and realized she'd bitten through her lower lip. A single copper bead rolled down her chin, vanished into the dust. She swiped it away and tightened her grip on the Winchester, resting across her knees. Below her perch on the berm, twilight seeped over the Caldwell spread, swallowing fences and outbuildings in thick indigo until only the main ranch house held any light at all. One lamp in an upstairs window, flickering like a candle hammered by wind. The bunkhouse was dark. The hands were out riding perimeter. Silas's idea, once word reached them of 2 freight cars derailed 30 miles east. The telegraph operator said bandits stripped the shipment clean and headed west. But nobody in knife-edge territory robbed rolling stock for freight alone. Guns, cattle, hostages, anything that paid. And a woman in a ruined ball gown trailing mud and rumors? That made her ransom ripe as peaches in August. Silas's warning from an hour ago slammed through her again. Asterisk, if they come, they'll come hungry. Don't let the first shot be theirs. Asterisk, she flexed her shoulder, feeling the angry rasp of the knife wound beneath her shirt. Hollis Saint's parting gift, back at the depot. It had knitted crusty beneath a strip of linen and mashed sage leaves, but every heartbeat still fluttered hot along the slash, reminding her what hesitation cost. Amare's nervous wicker drifted up from the shadowed pens. Somewhere a coyote yipped, answered by another farther south. Lorelei breathed with them, shallow, letting her mind unspool maps. Distance from berm to fence 60 yards. Time to cycle lever, aim, fire 2 seconds if steady. Number of cartridges tucked in her. Belt loops 13. Enough, if she didn't miss. The prairie answered with the hush of tall grass kneeling before nightfall. And then creak, wood complaining beneath weight, faint but deliberate. Not a coyote. A boot. Lorelei slid onto her belly, flattened against hard-baked dirt. The odor of sage filled her nostrils. In the near darkness she saw nothing, but she felt the wrongness. Sound bled from a point just beyond the stacked feed boxes near the corral gate. Creak again, followed by the muted jingle of a bit being steadied. She wet her lips. "Just breathe," she whispered, whether to herself or to the earth. She didn't know, and sighted down the Winchester as shapes coagulated out of dark. 1, 2, 3 riders walking mounts through the gap in the outer fence. No campfire glow behind them, no chatter. Professionals. Thunder rumbled, distant, as if the sky objected. In the flash that followed, she counted 4 more silhouettes fanning wide, rifles cradled crooked arm. 7 in all, Saint's vultures. Her pulse drummed quick. "First shot's yours," Silas had said. She lined the bead on the lead man-broad shoulders, derby hat, no mask. A man too proud to hide his face. Good. She set her finger on the trigger. Breathing with the grass, and a hand closed gently on the stock. "Hold, Red." Silas's voice, low beside her ear. She nearly jerked the trigger anyway. Range is long. Might spook the others out of pattern. She hadn't heard him climb. The berm. He slid beside her, Spencer rifle hugged tight, outline barely visible but for the faint lantern glow that painted the strong line of his jaw softened now by concerned eyes. She hissed. 7 so far, he nodded. Saw 2 more shadows looping. South tree line, likely 9. 9 against the 2 of us? 2 of them, he corrected. Us makes 3. She frowned, counted again, and spotted a 4th shape slinking between outbuildings. Franny, the freckled ranch cook, petticoats tucked, double-barreled shotgun braced under one elbow like she stirred batter. Franny nodded once toward the berm, eyes shining with either fear or ferocity. Lorelei couldn't tell which. Silas breathed. "We wait till they reach the pens. Bottleneck there." The men below advanced slow, unaware. Hooves scuffed dirt. A tin pail toppled somewhere inside. The tack shed, and a muttered curse answered. Then Derby hat halted, lifted gloved fist. The column froze. Wind stilled. Lorelei's nerves hummed. She could almost smell Saint's cologne drifting ahead of them, cigar smoke, black pepper, arrogance. Her teeth clenched. The day he carved. Her dress and her dignity at the station. He'd sliced something bigger, illusion. Every mile since, she'd sown resolve with every ragged stitch and vowed to hang him with it. Derby hat turned, whispered to his flank man signal lost to distance, and 3 riders broke left, vanishing behind the bunkhouse. The others dismounted and led horses forward. Silas tracked them with the Spencer. "Soon," he muttered. "Let 'em string tight." They slunk into the corral gate. The timber latch groaned. Hooves clopped hollow on planks. Silas exhaled. "Now," Lorelei fired. Her first shot barked like angry thunder. Derby Hat's shoulder exploded crimson. He spun, dropping firearm and falling under his startled mare. Silas's Spencer slammed. Twice sock back kicks that echoed across flatland, dropping 2 more rustlers in the gateway. Franny's shotgun boomed, flame-licking dusk, and a man behind the bunkhouse howled. Sudden mayhem. Horses squealed, cattle bellowed, men hollered curses, muzzle flashes stitched the dark. Barn wall splinters hissed overhead. Lorelei cycled lever. Chambered fresh round, sighted on a silhouette scrambling for cover. She squeezed. He jerked, toppled limp. Return fire peppered the berm, dirt spitting. Silas pushed her lower. Fall back to haystack. They crabbed down backside of berm, rifles hugged, as bullets thudded where heads had been. Lorelei's wounded. Shoulders screamed, but she kept grip. They sprinted 8 paces to hay ricks near the smokehouse. Sliding behind bales stacked man-high. Silas snapped fresh rounds into his rifle. The flank pens. We can't let him draw us into. Crossfire. Lorelei peered between bale slats. Movement to west fence, another pair vaulting rails. So Saint's pack was a full dozen at least. More than ammo belts could feed. We need advantage. Got one. Silas jerked chin toward windmill, the tall iron skeleton east of bunkhouse. Tanks brimming. A spark in the right spot. Flood's main yard. Realization hit. Turn the yard to mud. He grinned grim. Bandits on horseback, muck up quick. Bullets clanged off smokehouse roof. He jammed cartridges home and rose. Cover me to trough. Lorelei laid suppressing fire, forcing shapes behind lumber pile, while Silas sprinted, low, to the windmill ladder. Shots chased him, 2 pinged iron struts. He climbed, disappearing in gloom. A heartbeat later, metal squealed. The sluice gate groaned open. Water gushed from overhead tank, slapping earth in a roaring sheet. Mud fountained where dry yard had been, rushing downhill, swirling around corral posts. Horses shrilled in panic. Men shouted confusion. Asterisk water? Asterisk what the hell? Asterisk feet. SLOPPING. Silas slid down ladder and darted to haystack again, soaked but smiling. That'll slow boots. Lorelei reloaded, listening for hoofbeats but hearing only suction splats. She raised rifle, found a silhouette wading knee-deep in churn. Crack, the figure collapsed face first in muck. 6 down, Silas counted. Breath calm. Unknown. Wounded, they'll pull back. A shrill whistle cut night air. Rustlers scrambled, some limping. Lorelei scanned for command source and spotted him at barn corner, Hollis Saint himself. Sable overcoat dry despite rain of silt water, lantern. In one hand, Schofield revolver in the other. Scarlet beard trimmed, hat pristine, lips curved like sign. When his gaze found hers over rifle sights, he tipped hat mock salute. Redbird, he mouthed. Her stomach curled. Memories flashed the depot, laughter as he tore her stays, promised to fetch quiet rancher's pretty prize. She centered. Bead on his heart. But before she fired, Saint tossed lantern high. Glass shattered on barn wall. Flame-licked weather-dry siding. Pitch had been brushed earlier for repainting. The boards burst alive. Fire! Silas roared. They want the herd stampeding. Smoke belched, rolling thick. Wind greedily sucked flames up shingles. Inside barn, frantic whinnies. Cattle in corral kicked rails. Lorelei's trigger discipline faltered. She shot 2 quick bullets, sparking Saint's coat button, but missing meat. He vanished behind billow of smoke as bullets from his lieutenants thumped their cover. Silas gripped her elbow. Barn's priority. We lose horses, we lose chase. Metal. Shrieked burning roof beam splitting. Fire raged bright enough to paint battlefield. She could see everywhere. So could they. Franny darted from smokehouse, skirts wet. Bucket brigade started toward rain barrel. A bullet tore ground near her feet. She shrieked but kept running. Lorelei stood. I'm making for barn doors. Not alone, Silas snapped. Slinging rifle, he pulled Colt from holster. Move! They sprinted low through thickening mire. Heat scorched exposed skin. Crackling timbers spat sparks. Lorelei gagged on smoke but reached sliding doors. Iron latch seared fingers, yet she forced it. Inside, a dozen horses reared, eyes rolling white, ropes snapping. Silas shoved her his Colt. Cut lead lines. I'll douse hayloft. She slashed ropes with pocket knife. Horses thundered outdoor into muddy yard, scattering rustlers who fired. Wild, fearful of hooves, Silas mounted loft ladder, disappearing into flame-edge gloom. Lorelei freed last mare, then turned to Yard Saint's men regrouped beyond corral. Numbers thinned but still dangerous. Sudden crash overhead beam fell where Silas had climbed. Debris blocked ladder, fire blossoming. Silas. She screamed. No. Answer. She bolted inside, but smoke roared out, forcing retreat. Heat singed lashes. She circled barn, searching for other access. Loft trapdoor on east wall above feed ramp. She climbed ramp slick with mud, boots slipping, drawing daggered pain from thigh wound but climbing anyway. Gunfire clipped boards near her head. She ducked, peeked. Saint 20 yards away, pistol steady, smirk certain. She lashed out, flung spent rope cleat toward him. It missed but forced him behind corn crib. She reached loft lip, grabbed beam, hoisted onto burning floor. Flame tongues licked. Timbers everywhere. She crawled low, smoke black. Silas. Here. Faint cough. She spotted him half buried under sacks of alfalfa. Leg trapped by beam. Face soot-streaked. She skittered over, ignoring fiery rain. She leveraged beam, but it barely shifted. Leave. Me, he rasped. Save yourself. She glared, coughing. Not how promises work. She found iron pry bar among scattered tools. Wedged it beneath beam, heaved with every ounce. Muscles trembled, knife wound tore. But timber protested, lifted. Silas grunted, dragged leg free. They half stumbled, half crawled toward trapdoor. Below, Saint waited, gun cocked. Flames haloed. Him like demon prince. Touching, he called. Bring him down, Redbird. We settled debt proper. Silas pulled her back. He wants hostages, she swallowed. He wants me. Then he'll have to take you over my corpse. Beam overhead cracked. They had seconds. She scanned. Pulley rope dangling near hay. Shoot. She yanked rope, tied quick slipknot around Silas's chest. Hold tight. She looped other end around loft rafter, fed slack through trap. Then she kicked trapdoor open hard. Saint stepped back, aiming upward. She shoved Silas through opening first line, paying out. He swung, colliding with corral fence, but alive. She braced to follow when bullet tore plank near her hand. Stay, Saint barked. Trade your life for his. She laughed ragged. You win nothing with me. Then she sliced rope with Bowie and leapt. She fell 15 feet, hit muddy yard in roll that knocked wind but spared bones. Fire roared above as loft collapsed inward. Saint fired twice. One bullet slashed her sleeve, second hit mud beside cheek. She scrambled to feet, grabbed Silas's dropped Colt, and fired back until chambers clicked empty. Saint ducked. Rose's furious gun snapped on spent round. He tossed pistol aside, drew Bowie. Dance ends now, he charged. Lorelei braced, but Silas, limping, intercepted, swinging broken beam like cudgel. Timber met Saint's forearm with crack. Knife clattered. Silas swung again. Saint dodged, drawing Derringer from boot. Snap report loud. Silas reeled, grazed along ribs. Lorelei lunged, shoulder checking Saint aside. They hit mud together. Grappling, he was strong. His fingers found her throat, nails biting. She kneed his stomach. He snarled, head butted her brow. Stars exploded. Over roar of flame she heard cattle rails splinter, stampede imminent. She clawed Saint's face, gouging cheek. He howled. She rolled atop him, seized Derringer, turned muzzle under his chin. "Call them off," she hissed. His eyes glinted murderous. "Pull the trigger and you drown with me." Stampede thunder built. Corral gate collapsed, steers poured into yard, hooves churning mud to tar, jostling. Silas shouted warning. Lorelei risked glance wall of bovine muscle bearing down close. She jerked Saint upright, slammed knee to his groin, wrenched dagger from belt, and sliced girth strap on nearest riderless horse. The saddle slid, spooking nag sideways, colliding with steers, diverting wave just enough to split around them. But second wave barreled. Unstoppable, she shoved Saint forward into path. His scream drowned beneath bellow of a 1,200-pound steer colliding square. He vanished in maelstrom of horns. Lorelei vaulted sideways, diving beneath broken wagon frame as sea of cattle flooded yard. Hooves drumming thunder, she curled fetal, world shaking, mud surging. A horn-sliced wagon slat, inches from her hip. Another steer stumbled, crashed overhead, but frame held. Minutes or eternity later, hooves faded. Smoke still billowed, but barn fire now collapsed inward, fuel spent. Charcoal smell masked blood. Lorelei crawled from refuge, limbs shaking, mud cakes crusting hair. Yard looked like battlefield cattle milling free. Rustlers fled or trampled, barn ruins glowing red. No sign of Saint, only churned muck and a crimson scarf half buried. Silas limped toward her, one hand pressing bleeding side. "You good?" She nodded, though knees wobbled. "Saint?" He scanned morass. Steers might have carried him half a mile. Or he didn't finish. Franny emerged, soot covered but grinning. Lever action still smoked. Well, that was lively. Farther off, first ranch hands galloped back, silhouettes against rising moon. Lorelei exhaled relief ragged. But dread returned quick. Saint's body unfound meant Saint perhaps still breathing. Silas followed her. "Gaze, we'll track at first light." She nodded, but mind churned. 9 men dead, barn lost, herd scattered, and Saint's obsession unsatisfied. He'd crawl out of hell to claim her yet. Thunder growled again from northern. Hills another storm brewing, or cannon echo of trouble racing ahead. Lorelei squared shoulders, wincing at wounds, and lifted gaze to stars peeking through smoke. Next time, she vowed to night itself, I finish this. And somewhere in prairie dark, a ragged silhouette dragged itself from a creek bed. Crimson beard matted in mud, eyes burning brighter than barn embers, whispering her name like broken prayer. Asterisk 2. Be continued. Gradually, flame surrendered to steam, smoke thinned. When only embers remained, she sagged, muscles quivering. A hush fell. Hooves clattered in the distant survivors fleeing. Crickets resumed tentative song. Peppy and Fitch trotted over. Weapons still ready. Peppy's hat brim was blackened. Fitch's beard smoldered at one edge. "Torres won't try again tonight," Fitch said, voice hoarse. "Lost too many." "Torres wasn't here," Peppy observed, scanning bodies being hauled into rows for identification. Sent hired guns. Coward wants others to bleed first. Lorelei knew it too. Santiago Torres, rail baron, cattle magnate, self-styled king in waiting, did nothing directly. He bought loyalty, burned obstacles. Lorelei had become his newest obstacle when she refused his protection contract. First sabotage. Now open assault. She wiped soot from her brow. Then he'll come in person next time, with lawyers or with artillery. Fitch grunted. Either way, we better be ready. ###. They buried 3 bodies before sunrise. 2 raiders and 1 Caldwell hand caught by shrapnel. Miriam reads Psalms in a voice that broke only once. Lorelei stood graveside, wrapped in the quiet rancher's saddle blanket. the same one Ezra Caldwell had draped over her torn dress the night she arrived. Blood and smoke had settled into the wool, but its weight steadied her. When dawn blushed the eastern sky, the survivors gathered in the dining hall. Coffee brewed thick. Ezra rose from a chair by the hearth, left arm in sling from a grazing wound, and surveyed his exhausted crew. "This won't break us," he said. "But the next strike will be bigger. We need allies, ammunition, and proof of Torres's crimes." Lorelei's telegram to the governor went unanswered. "The law in Abilene claims no jurisdiction. That leaves us one option. Ride to Fort Valor, speak to Colonel Anders face to face." Fort Valor lay 60 miles north. The garrison owed Caldwell a debt. Ezra had supplied beef through the worst winter in a decade. But the colonel was cautious. He'd need more than ranch rumors. Lorelei's mind churned. Proof: the rustlers carried Torres's brand. The sniper's rifle might bear custom engraving traceable to the Baron's gunsmith. And there was the ledger entry she'd glimpsed in the land office, the night she stole into town searching for her own name. "I'll go," she said. Heads turned. "Take 3 riders, cross the fork by midday, make the fort before dusk." Ezra frowned. "You're wounded." "Only my pride," she lied. Shoulder throbbed like a furnace. "I know the ledger pages we need. Anders won't turn us away if we put evidence on his desk." Murmurs rippled. Peppy stood. "I ride with the senorita." Fitch jerked a thumb to himself. "Reckon you'll need someone who knows dynamite." Etiquette. Ezra surveyed their determined faces, sighed. "Take fresh horses, extra canteens, and this." He slid a slim folder across the table maps annotated by his own hand. "There's an old Ute trail west of the river, less patrolled." Lorelei nodded. "We leave within the hour." Hush, hush, they rode at a steady lope, dust devils unfurling behind. By mid-morning, the prairie heat turned the horizon into a wavering sea of mirage. Peppy whistled a melancholy tune while Fitch chewed jerky and grumbled about saddle boils. Lorelei kept her thoughts on the trail ahead, but memories prowled the edges. The lavish St. Louis ballroom, Josephine's envy as Lorelei spun in silk. Fiancé Charles's cold eyes when he discovered she'd read his secret ledgers. Then the station platform, breath knocked from her lungs by the news her ticket was one way, only bride sold to an alliance she never agreed to. The gutting train departure, leaving her abandoned in a torn dress. Those memories once shamed her. Now they fueled resolve. Torres and his ilk treated lives like assets expendable. She intended to change the ledger's arithmetic dot by afternoon. They reached the forked river. A crude ferry rope still spanned the water, but the flatboat was gone hacked loose and likely swept downstream. Wheel ruts suggested recent sabotage. Fitch tested the rope with a tug. "Won't carry horses." A pale half-moon climbed into a sky furrowed with storm tatters, its sickle glow sliding over the Caldwell homestead like the blade of a scythe. Lorelei Gable crouched on the sod roof of the line shack overlooking the north pasture, pulse hammering in the hollow of her throat. She had watched sunsets from this very spot for weeks, feeling the place settle into her bones with every red-gold evening, and now that familiarity became its own kind of weapon. She could map the ranch blindfolded, hear it breathe. The wind told her when the smokehouse vented properly. The creak of rawhide thongs announced which gate a ranch hand forgot to latch. Tonight, those subtle voices had fallen into a tense hush, as if the land itself held its breath. Up the rise, behind the main house, lamplight flickered against drawn curtains. Miriam Caldwell, matriarch, bookkeeper, and reluctant field surgeon, moved like a silhouette across the upstairs parlor, checking rifle positions at each window. Below, the bunkhouse door hung open, spill lanterns throwing white tongues. Over the dooryard where fresh barrels waited behind hastily stacked hay bales. Every living soul on the Caldwell spread who could hold steel had been given clear orders. Stay inside the perimeter. Fire only on a positive mark and keep eyes. On Lorelei's flare. If everything went right, they might never have to shoot. If everything went wrong, the moon would set on a massacre. She licked cracked lips, tasting dust and the metallic echo of fear. On either side of her, two figures lay prone. Jose Pepe Estrada, the lanky vaquero whose quiet jokes never quite hid the grief of a brother lost to railroad expansion, and Magnus Fitch, ex-Union sapper turned trail cook, a scar twisting one side of his beard where shrapnel had kissed skin. Pepe nursed a Spencer repeater. Fitch cradled a stubby 10-gauge Coach gun. Lorelei held her Winchester 73 steady, despite the tremor in her wounded shoulder. A week ago, she'd never fired a rifle. Tonight, she was the forward picket. 9:15. Fitch rasped, glancing at the nickel watch he kept tucked in a vest pocket alongside two faded photographs. Devil's hour ain't far. Tors'll move before 10, Pepe murmured in Spanish, eyes narrowing on the black strip of wagon road snaking through cottonwoods below. His men don't like fighting in full dark superstition. Lorelei knew the superstition well. Caballos de Sombra, the shadow horses said to carry righteous spirits. Caldwell cowboys had begun whispering that Lorelei herself rode one the night she and Ezra stampeded rustlers back across the Trinity. She'd laughed then, uneasy and flattered. Tonight she clung to the legend like armor. Let Torres's hired guns fear Mirage's fear made men sloppy. Thunder rumbled on the eastern horizon, though no lightning followed. A dry storm dangerous in its own right. Sparks could turn the prairie into a sheet of flame. Not tonight, she prayed. Please, not tonight. Hoofbeats, distant at first then multiplying, drumming against the packed roadbed in an irregular cadence that marked individual riders rather than the rolling thunder of a cavalry column. 7, 10. Hard to tell with the wind gusting, but definitely more than the four who tried raiding the tool shed 2 nights back. She raised 2 fingers, signal for ready. Fitch's Coach gun barrels glinted. Pepe thumbed a cartridge into his Spencers. Breach. Below, lanterns winked out one by one, Caldwell hands melting into deeper recesses. Miriam's upstairs light remained a deliberate trap. The riders slowed as they approached the property line marked by bleached wagon wheel hubs. Voices floated up, half mocking, half wary. One barked an order. Hooves fanned out, crunching gravel. Wait until they cross the first post, Lorelei whispered, breath steaming despite the warm night. Fitch, lantern on my mark. Pepe, take the rightmost. Her shoulder ached, every heartbeat sending a spark of white along nerves stitched earlier by Miriam's deft fingers. She breathed around the pain, letting it sharpen her focus. The lead horse stepped past the hub. She squeezed the Winchester's trigger. The rifle bucked. Flames spat from the muzzle. The rider toppled sideways before sound reached them, a hollow slap of lead punching flesh. Chaos erupted. Fitch yanked the lamp's hood string. Harsh light cascaded down the incline, catching dust and terrified faces. Pepe fired twice. One shot winged a man's Stetson. The second shattered a saddle. Horn and unseated its owner. Return gunfire cracked, wild and high. Bullets buzzed overhead like angry hornets, shearing splinters from the shack roof. Lorelei cycled her lever, sighted on a muzzle flash, and fired again. A scream confirmed the hit. Below, Caldwell ranchers answered with disciplined volleys. From windows and hay bale blinds, 2 of Torres's men wheeled their mounts, trying to retreat, but more riders surged up the lane, blocking escape. The new wave carried torches. They mean to burn us out. Fitch growled. First shed goes, sparks'll carry to the main house. Pepe agreed, grim. Lorelei's mind raced. Fire changed everything. Caldwell outbuildings were tinder dry. They had water wagons ready, but if flames leapt the pasture they'd lose livestock and cover. Magnus, you still carry that nitroglycerin powder? She asked. Fitch's grin flashed white through soot. 2 half-sticks left in my kit. Gives us one chance. She pointed to the nearest stack of hay bales positioned at the yard's eastern gate. When the torch riders breach that line, blow the road, turn their own fire back on them. Won't just scare him, Fitch warned. Might kill him. Lorelei leveled the Winchester at a rider brandishing a torch. Better than letting innocent people burn. She fired. The torch pinwheeled, landing in damp dirt. Flames sputtered. Fitch crawled backward, disappearing behind the shack, leaving Peppy to cover the gap. The Mexican Vasiro sang softly under his breath, an old corrido about a bandit king betrayed by a silver bullet. It steadied Lorelei's nerves in a way silence could not. More riders advanced, firing low this time. Pellets of earth stung her cheeks. She rolled, took aim at the nearest torch, missed. Peppy's shot found the man instead, dropping horse and rider in a tangle of legs. Then a new sound cleaved the night. A single rifle cracked deeper, heavier than anything else, reverberating across pasture. Splinters exploded inches from Lorelei's left boot. Sniper. She cursed under her breath, scanning the shadowed tree line beyond the wagons. There a glint off a long gun nestled in the crotch of a cottonwood branch. She exhaled, felt the world narrow to the width of her rear sight. Wind steadied, squeezed out the cottonwood's bark, erupted behind the sniper. He flinched, lost aim, but didn't fall. Her round had missed by half a foot, good enough to spoil his shot, not enough to neutralize. The sniper recovered quickly, pivoted toward her muzzle flash. A heartbeat later, the rifle boomed again, splashing bark across her shoulders. She rolled, nearly slid from the shallow roof. Pain lanced her side where shingles tore fabric. Below, torchlight swelled. Riders closed on the yard. Magnus! She shouted. As if summoned by her cry. A blossom of yellow-white roared at the road's edge. The concussion hit her like a physical shove. Heat slapped her face. Debris rained down. Horses screamed. Flames leapt skyward, catching spilled lamp oil and stray torches. The lane became a furnace. Peppy whooped, working his Spencer methodically, cutting down silhouettes, stumbling from the fireball. The sniper's next shot went wild as his perch took a gust of heat that crackled leaves. Lorelei lined up again. Fired. This time the cottonwood branch jerked violently, and a form tumbled through shadow, not fatal, but out of action. Smoke drifted over their roof, acrid and thick. She coughed, eyes watering. The wind veered south, fanning flames away. From the bunkhouse but toward the tool shed. Gotta put that out, she rasped. Hay shed's catching. Peppy cried. Lorelei glanced downhill. Tiny tongues licked the roof straw of a storage shack. Not good. If the hay went, sparks could leap the dry lot fence and ignite the horse corral. We need the wagon pump, she ordered. Cover me. With that, she slung the Winchester, slid the 10 feet to ground, boots thudding in dust. Gunfire still cracked, but sporadic. Torres's men were routed, their formation shattered by the blast. Inside the perimeter, Caldwell Wranglers dashed with sloshing buckets. Lorelei sprinted for the pump wagon parked near the well, a 2-wheel cart fitted with a tin tank and hand crank hose, rigged by Fitch out of old boiler parts. She vaulted onto the runner board, seized the handle, and pushed toward the shed. 2 ranch hands intercepted her, grabbing the poles. Let us run it, miss. One pleaded. Lines need my shoulder width, she insisted. Truth. She didn't trust anyone else to steer between fences under fire. They relented. Together they skidded across churned mud to the hay shed. Flames lit 6 feet high now, snapping with greedy vigor. She braced, unlatched the hose, and cranked. Water coughed, then jetted a clean arc that sizzled against the blaze. As she worked, bullets crackled overhead, parting shots from retreating raiders. One thunked into the wagon side, sparking off metal. Another struck close. Enough to send shards past her cheek. She kept pumping. Upstream there's a limestone ford, Peppy said. Might cross single file. They followed the river 3 miles. The ford was usable but hazardous, smooth limestone shelves, slick with algae. They dismounted and led horses across. Water swirling thigh-high. Halfway, movement snagged Lorelei's eye. Glint of glass on the opposite bank. Sniper! She yelled, diving. A rifle cracked. Spray erupted where she'd stood. Fitch unleashed a string of curses, hauling his. Gelding forward. Peppy returned fire blindly, while Lorelei positioned her Winchester against a saddlebag, aiming off the glint. Second shot. The hidden marksman ducked, buying precious seconds. They scrambled out of the river, breath ragged. Hooves thundered 4. Riders emerged from scrub, revolvers raised. Fitch hurled a swear, snatched a flare from his kit, and struck steel to it. Blue smoke hissed skyward. The riders veered, uncertain. Peppy counted aloud in Spanish. Uno, dos, tres. Timing the fuse on a palm-sized nitro charge, tucked beneath the flare. En siete, he lobbed it into the rider's path. Explosion was modest compared to the night's inferno, but loud enough to spook horses. One reared, dumping its rider. Another bolted into brush. Gunfire wavered. Lorelei used the chaos, nailing the sniper's tree. Leaves shredded. The shooter hit ground, scrambling. Peppy finished him with a clean shot. The remaining 2 riders retreated south. Scouts, Fitch said, chest heaving. Torres tracking. We push harder, Lorelei decided. They remounted, galloped. Late afternoon sun slanted through Penan Pine as they entered rising foothills. The Ute trail Ezra marked proved reliable, narrow switchbacks but defensible. Ahead, Fort Valor's flagpole jabbed the sky. Relief surged, then died. Thick black smoke coiled from the fort's north barracks. Distant cracks of gunfire echoed. Under siege? Peppy murmured. No, Fitch said, jaw tight. That's an artillery test range. But smoke's wrong color. They crested a ridge. The parade ground teemed with soldiers drilling, oblivious to the smolder. Behind the south wall, a warehouse burned uncontrolled. Lorelei's stomach twisted. Supplies. Without them, the fort wouldn't ride to anyone's aid. They raced for the gate. Sentries lowered rifles when Peppy waved a white kerchief. Inside, officers barked feudal orders at fire crews hauling buckets. Colonel Anderstall, silver mustache, strode from headquarters, fury in each step. You 3, grab a line. Lorelei dismounted, saluted. Sir, we bring intelligence on Santiago Torres urgent. But first, where's your pump wagon? Anders blinked. Destroyed. Keg blew in the storehouse, wet season rations lost. Then use wind, she said. She scanned yard, spotted a cannon limber parked unused. Sir, if we wheel that limber broadside, discharge a blank load, we might blow the fire back on itself, rob it of air. The colonel stared, calculating. Lieutenant, he snapped, see the lady's plan executed. To Lorelei, report in 1 hour. If we still have a fort. 90 minutes later. Ash streaked Lorelei's face, but the warehouse smoldered. Only at edges. Colonel Anders poured whiskey for each of them in his map room. You saved my quartermaster's hide, he said. Now show me why. She produced charred brands cut from raiders' saddles, the rifle with custom scrollwork matching Torres's personal crest, and Ezra's annotated maps showing land grabs along rail spur lines. Anders frowned. Circumstantial. She unfolded the ledger pages, a web of payments from Torres cattle consolidated to private security contractors, dated same days as confirmed arson on competitor spreads. The colonel's brow furrowed. Forgery? I signed those entries under duress, Lorelei said. My fiance's family forced me to handle bookkeeping. I memorized code words. You'll find them repeated on these pages in my hand and in Torres's. Anders poured more whiskey, untouched by protocol. If this stands, I can request you S. Marshals and hold Torres on charges of racketeering, conspiracy, and domestic terror. But you need a witness, Peppy noted. The ledger's worthless without testimony, Fitch added. Torzel. Hire Pinkertons to disappear us. Lorelei met the colonel's gaze. I'll testify, Anders nodded slowly. You realize what that means? Protection, relocation, possibly Washington. I realize people died last night, she said. If I have a chance to stop more, I take it. The colonel exhaled. Very well. At dawn, I ride to Caldwell with 2 platoons. You 3 will remain here under guard. Lorelei balked. Sir, my place is with the ranch. Your place, Anders countered, is alive to sign an affidavit. He turned to Peppy and Fitch. Escort her to the officers' quarters. Double sentries. The meeting adjourned. Outside, lanterns bobbed along walls. Uneasy thick dot in the barracks corridor. Fitch muttered, feels wrong, leaving Caldwell to hold. Ezra can manage one night, Peppy said, though doubt darkened his tone. Lorelei knew sleep wouldn't. Find her. While sentry lanterns paced outside her door, she paced inside mine, churning with strategies, regrets, the gnawing fear of what Torres might attempt in their absence. Near midnight, soft footsteps halted outside. A guard knocked. Ma'am, telegraph for you, coded. She tore open the flimsy. It bore one line in Ezra's hand. Asterisk, asterisk, ride the storm's edge coals, under saddle. They're coming. Asterisk, asterisk, no signature needed. Torres had moved faster than anyone expected using the fort. Diversion to cover his push on Caldwell. The ranch would be besieged before Anders could mobilize. Lorelei bolted into the corridor, shoving past guards. Peppy and Fitch emerged from the adjoining room, weapons half raised. Change of plans, she said, thrusting the telegram at them. We leave now, cut across the Devil's Crest. If we ride through the night, we beat Anders's column by half a day. Fitch glanced at the message. That trails murder in daylight. Then we'll need wings, she replied. Eyes blazing. Because if we arrive late, Caldwell burns. She stormed toward the stables. Sentries shouted. One grabbed her arm. Peppy leveled his pistol, voice cold as iron. Lower your hand, amigo. The soldier swallowed. Obeyed. Moonlight glinted on tack as Lorelei threw a saddle over Ezra's. Second fastest Maria Gray with stamina for leagues. Fitch strapped powder satchels behind the cantle. Peppy cinched bedrolls and waterskins. They mounted, galloped for the postern gate. A bugle sounded alarm behind. They had minutes before. Pursuit. As the fort's adobe walls faded, Lorelei felt wind, tears from her eyes. Ahead, the Devil's Crest rose, a maze of basalt spires, and switchbacks said to swallow travelers whole. She urged the gray faster. Voice carried on the rush of air. Hold nothing back. We ride till dawn, or die on the trail. Behind her. Fitch laughed a raw, fearless bark, and Peppy began another corrido. This one about warriors racing the night to keep fire from their homes. The moon slid behind scudding cloud, plunging them into near darkness. Hooves struck sparks on stone. Distant thunder muttered on the plains. Lorelei fixed her gaze on the ribbon of pale granite tracing the crest. Every stride counted, and somewhere across those black miles, Santiago Torres gathered his full strength. Certain the quiet ranch was UNDEFENDED. He had no idea the shadow horse carried its rider home.